Chapter 795. Isn't he friends with Aisha? Aisha must have violated the taboo of the clan when she was removed from the position of saintess. I guess it's possible that Aisha privately transferred the Dragon Clan's resources to him. That's why she was removed from her position. He is just an ordinary boy in the outer wall, but he was able to become a pioneer. Eureka's eyes flashed as she deduced. He got Aisha's help and had a fortuitous encounter. It's not surprising that he has become a master in the inner wilderness. The King of Wings felt that what she said made sense, but he knew that the process in between couldn't be summarized in a few words. Even if a normal person had such a fated chance, it would be extremely difficult for them to advance step by step and reach where they were today. Furthermore, as a semi-successful person, he was very clear that the most difficult thing to overcome on the road to success wasn't the difficulties brought by the outside world, but the thought of wanting to live comfortably. He didn't overcome this idea, so he obediently submitted to the Wall Lord. He wasn't like Dragon Mother and Rock Devil who had hidden ambitions. This kid is not simple. King, he narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "According to what you said, he has the demonic marks of a splitter and is even stronger than the Grandmaster. Even if you and I work together, we most likely won't be able to fight him. We still have to work with those old fellows from a mystic sect and the Demonic Creature Research Institute. Will they be willing to help?" Eureka shook her head. "The first thing I came to after I escaped from the King's City was you. I haven't looked for them yet, but I think they will definitely help. After all, I am a temporary Wall Lord. They won't dare to disobey my order." It's not that simple. Iwang had expected that she hadn't been to the other two places, so he slowly said, "They are not as easy to talk to as I am. You also know that the Monster Research Institute is not a local force of Sylvia. They're the people that the God Kingdom has placed here. Even your father can't force them to do anything. Last time when we stole the Immortal's corpse, they helped us because the Immortal's corpse was not there and Sylvia would suffer a devastating blow which would endanger them. But this time is different. This kid surnamed Du seizing the throne has nothing to do with them. It doesn't matter who becomes the Wall Lord. Anyway, they don't dare to touch them. Otherwise, when a messenger of the God Kingdom comes to visit, they won't let him go easily." Eureka's face slightly changed. "They won't. We have been together for so many years. The royal family will try our best to cooperate with the Monster Research Institute. It's impossible for them to ignore this kindness. When you are in a high position, they will remember your kindness. However, after you fall from the throne, they might not remember who you are." The Yi-King shook his head slightly. He was getting on in years, so he was more clear and indifferent to the ways of the world. Eureka looked at him in a daze. She suddenly wanted to cry. Was she going to lose a big help like the Monster Research Institute? Without the Monster Research Institute's Stoneclaw Dragon Serpent, just her and Wing King? Don't worry. Sit down and drink some water. Wing King saw the disappointment in her eyes. He sighed and comforted her. Eureka didn't have the mood to drink water and rest. She looked at him blankly. "Uncle Wing King, what do you think we should do? Is there no way to convince the Monster Research Institute?" Wing King sighed. "It's very difficult. In my opinion, we can only tolerate this matter for the time being. You said that this kid is stronger than the State Master. Don't forget that behind him is Aisha, who awakened 5 times. Although I don't know whether Aisha's 5th awakening is real or not, she was a real troublesome person. Now that she has turned into a corpse, her physique will increase, and her bloodline will continue to awaken automatically. We can't do anything by ourselves. We can only wait for your father to come back to slaughter this kid. At that time, you can also return to King's City." Eureka saw through his thoughts. She widened her eyes and said, "You mean I should temporarily hide until my father returns? That's the only way." Wing King nodded with a face full of regret. Eureka was angry. She didn't expect him to be so timid, but she didn't dare to reprimand him. She gritted her teeth and said, "Uncle Wing King, my father went to God's Kingdom of God for less than 5 or 6 years. He usually goes for 10 years. This time, it is likely that he will go for 10 years and return with the messenger of God's kingdom. Do you want me to drag out an ignoble existence and live in the shadow of darkness for 4 or 5 years before he comes back?" "Your Highness, Don't be so pessimistic. Maybe your father will come back soon. Wing King persuaded. Moreover, if you want to achieve great things, then a moment of forbearance is nothing. That boy surnamed Du was able to succeed today because he has been forbearance all this time. Eureka gritted her teeth and said, "It's not that I'm pessimistic. It's not that I can't endure. But the enemy is in front of us. We have the ability and hope to kill him, but we are afraid of failure. We can only helplessly watch him abuse his power. Moreover, according to my guess, my father will go to God's kingdom of God for 10 years. When he comes back, it will be 4 or 5 years later. At that time, the boy will have become a master. Even if my father comes back, he can escape to the wilderness and live outside the giant wall for a long time." "Your Highness, how do you know that your father will go for 10 years? This time, the invaders attacked us. The ruler behind them should have gotten the news from God's kingdom. They knew that my father wasn't there. They chose this time to invade our giant wall. They should have made a detailed plan and calculated the time to arrive here. They know that even if there is an error, it is enough to leave enough time to avoid bumping into my father." Eureka gritted her teeth and said, "This means that my father will not come back in a short period of time." Iwang was startled and suddenly came to his senses. But soon he thought of the problem of the invaders. The invaders were taken away by that boy during the last battle. Where are they now? The sacred remains are still in their hands. Could it be that they have already taken the sacred remains and left this place? Eureka's mind was in a mess. She said, "I don't know either, but he's colluding with these invaders. He probably won't just let them take away the god's remains. As for the specifics, we'll have to capture him to find out." Iwang's eyes turned and said, "Your Highness, don't worry. Maybe we could try to contact the invaders and let them both suffer." Eureka was slightly startled. She looked at him, and a trace of disappointment flashed in her eyes. She was slightly silent and didn't say anything. Half an hour later, a secret letter was sent. Iwang took it and glanced at it. He suddenly looked up at Eureka and said, "Your Highness, it's from that boy." After saying that, he handed the letter to her. Eureka took it and looked at it. She was so angry that her eyes almost turned black. This letter actually said that she colluded with the invaders and created the corpse chaos, and even wanted her. The most infuriating thing was that she saw the seal of the royal scepter at the bottom of the letter. This meant that this was genuine news from the royal family. "Your Highness, I see the royal seal on the letter. It seems that someone in the palace has betrayed you." Iwang pondered and said, "He wants to distort the truth and put you on the wanted list so that he can sit on the throne. I reckon that he will attack the counts next. I just don't know how many of the 12 counts can stand up to him." Eureka's face changed slightly. In the face of life and death, how many people could stand up for her? In the palace, Dean told Saul to send letters to the 12 counts, as well as other big and small barons, viscounts, and other nobles, informing them of the news of his succession and asking them to come and congratulate him. The so-called congratulation was a screening. Anyone who didn't come would be the enemy. At this point, the nobles who received the letter would naturally know. Dean only needed to quietly wait for them to make a choice. If they chose to be the enemy, he only needed to kill them. There was no need to talk nonsense. Chapter 796. Mount St. Lucia, headquarters of Monster Research Institute. A dark mountain path meandered like a snake, leading straight to the top of the mountain. On the square at the top of the mountain, there were statues of all kinds of ferocious monsters. It was like a different world. Some familiar monsters, such as the Splitter, the demonic dragon, the bat voice, and other legendary monsters, were in different postures, looking down at the mountain path outside the square. Anyone who came here from the mountain path would have a terrible feeling of being stared at by many monsters. Behind the sculptures of these ferocious monsters was a dimly lit building. No matter how bright the sky was, this place was always gloomy and silent. All the light seemed to be absorbed by the sculptures in the square, leaving only a gloomy atmosphere. One of the buildings was filled with books. It was the library of the Monster Research Institute. It was the place where the director stayed all year round. It was more like an office than the council hall. Director, the palace has sent a letter. A shadow wearing a dark purple robe and a silver gray hood quietly came to the basement of the library. He whispered in front of a 4 or 5 meters long curved desk. A silver-haired old man, wearing a brown scholar robe and presbyopic glasses, was sitting on the desk. He was holding a book with a dark red cover. There was a string of letters on the cover of the book. If Dean saw it, he would recognize that it was Old English. The silver-haired old man was frowning and concentrating on flipping the book. It seemed that he was reading the contents inside. Hearing this, the silver-haired old man raised his head and glanced at the shadow. He took the letter that was handed to him. This letter was in the style of a confidential letter. He took the wax and shook open the letter to read it. Slowly, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. The palace was attacked. The person shrouded in shadows said in a low voice, "I have also just received news that the palace has been attacked. Currently, the situation in the palace is unclear. The invaders are still waiting inside. Her Highness Yulida's whereabouts are unknown. Does this letter ask us to go and reinforce them?" So that's how it is. The silver-haired old man's fingers trembled. He passed the letter to the torch and burned it to ashes. The letter isn't from Her Highness. It's from the person who attacked the palace. He said that Her Highness colluded with the intruders outside the giant wall to create chaos. The loss of the god's corpse was planned by Her Highness. Oh, this person is really thick-skinned. He just drove away little Yulida and then convicted her. The shadow seemed relieved. So the person who attacked the palace wasn't the intruders who robbed the god's corpse. I didn't expect that there would be someone who took advantage of the situation. Director, should we help Her Highness Yulida get rid of this person? The silver-haired old man put down the book in his hand and muttered, "The palace is guarded by Commander Yamos and little Yulida. Both of them are masters of the Inner Baron. This person was able to defeat them and make it difficult for little Yulida to match him. This means that he is also a master of the Inner Baron that is more difficult to deal with. If little Yulida's light chaser or magic mark was ranked on the Sylvia Divine Wall, it would probably be on par with the demonic Dragonja. The person who can defeat her is at least at the level of the Dragon Mother, who has not activated the power of the Ice Demon. With our current strength, even if we want to help, we are unable to." The shadow understood and nodded. This person has been dormant for a long time. He attacked when we were at our weakest. He should have prepared for a long time. He is really a despicable villain. The silver-haired old man put down the book in his hand and said, "Commander Yamos and little Yulida are in the palace. Both of them are masters of the inner wilderness." The silver-haired old man nodded and said indifferently, "But it's precisely because he's despicable that he succeeded. We don't have to worry about this matter. It's very likely that the invaders are still hiding here. From the success of the last bait plan, we can see that these invaders won't let this matter rest. They will most likely seek revenge and slaughter everyone here. This is the most troublesome matter." The shadow was stunned. "They haven't left? How is that possible? It has been more than a month, and there is no news from them. Aren't they in a hurry to go back? If they have left with the god's corpse, then the next few days won't be so peaceful." The silver-haired old man suddenly thought of something. "I don't think it will be long before Her Highness comes here to ask for help. I won't see her then. She's used to acting like a spoiled child to me. I can't refuse her face to face. You should talk to her. Let her wait for her father to come back and rest here for the time being." The shadow nodded. "Director, since you know that they haven't left, why don't we take this opportunity to take back the god's corpse?" "It's too difficult." The silver-haired old man sighed. "We have tried our best. Let's leave the rest to fate. If it doesn't work, then we can ask the kingdom of God to send another one. But we will have to suffer in the meantime." The secret letter from the royal family spread to the nobles' territories in various cities. Now that the corpses had subsided and the secret letter was sent by limitless individuals, the speed of transmission was extremely fast. The news reached the hands of all the nobles in half a day. "Dean, who dares to call himself the Wall Lord? He wants us to help in the arrest of the princess? Ridiculous. Her Highness colluded with the invaders to steal the god's corpse." "He a load of nonsense. This person's surname is very strange. There doesn't seem to be any of the three major families with this surname. He should be in control of the palace since he sent the secret letter. According to the letter, the whereabouts of the Lord is unknown. Her Highness has been brave and good at fighting since childhood. She's on the same level as the old guys in the family. But she can't do anything to this person. It's strange. The nobles in various cities were in an uproar after they received the secret letter. They contacted each other to confirm the authenticity of the news. Soon they unified the source of the news and shared the intelligence network that the Earl had placed in King City. When the news came back, the nobles were in an uproar again. They didn't expect that the palace would really be occupied without anyone knowing, and the princess, who was the rightful princess, was now a wanted criminal. Even the army had posted wanted posters in the streets and alleys of King City. All of this was too sudden and too fast. All the nobles felt like they were in a dream. Let me participate in the enthronement ceremony? Wishful thinking. Go and find out who this Dean is and where he came from. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Dean had his breakfast in a warm and luxurious dining room. He estimated that the buffer time given to the nobles was almost up. It was time for them to show their attitude. Chapter 797. Among the 12 earls, who has the least servants? Dean looked straight ahead, but asked Saul. He had sent invitations to the 12 earls, but there was no reply. In the past 3 days, only a few small nobles had come to seek refuge with him. They also asked to be promoted to nobility and be rewarded with land. Dean was too lazy to pay attention to them. He let Saul temporarily settle in a hotel near the palace. The least servants? Saul was surprised. He didn't expect Dean to ask such a strange question. He already knew what Dean was going to do, but what did it have to do with the number of servants? He couldn't figure out, so he said, Your Highness, as far as I know, Count Shiming has the least servants. Count Shiming is eccentric and doesn't like to contact people. He rarely attends the banquets between nobles. Even the banquets held by the royal family are often absent. In addition to him, there's only one daughter left in his family. He doesn't have many children. Saul was startled. He suddenly realized the purpose of Dean's question. There are not many servants in the family. Did Dean want to choose an earl with a small family? He glanced at Dudeen, but only saw the side of his face. It was extraordinarily indifferent. There was no feeling of human feelings. There was an illusion in his heart. But soon he thought of Earl Zimming. Although this person was eccentric, but he was also a famous, infatuated earl. His wife died early, leaving only a daughter. He didn't marry for the rest of his life, which led to sparse family connections. His wife was an ordinary singer. Count Shiming ignored the rumors and slander to pursue his wife. It became a story of bards singing about him. Later, the story of him sacrificing his virginity for his wife was widely spread. He was a pitiful person. Was he going to be the first to die? He sighed in his heart and didn't say anything. Who wouldn't be pitiful in the face of death? Shiming, Dean whispered. He remembered the name. 2 wings quickly grew out from the gap of the splitter's armor. He soared into the sky and swept away. Half an hour later, Dean arrived at a big city not far from the king's city. He saw a white flower flag on the towering wall. It was a flower called Snowbird. It represented the Count of Shiming's family. Looking down from above, the city was not as dilapidated as the other disaster cities. It was not affected by the zombies. Dean flew into the city. Not long after, 2 figures suddenly flew in front of him. Both of them had strange wings on their backs. One was a huge butterfly wing, and the other's wings were vibrating very fast. The thin wings were transparent, and there were silver lines on the wings. It looked like a silver line was dancing behind them. May I ask who you are? The mature woman with butterfly wings carefully asked Dean. Dean could see at a glance that the heat source of the 2 men was just a limitless being, but the magic marks were rare. He didn't slow down and spat out a word. Get lost. Both of their faces changed. The mature woman held back her anger and said, This is the territory of Earl Shiming. If you want to visit, please tell us your name. We will. She saw that Dean didn't slow down. Instead, he exuded an amazing murderous aura. She was scared and hurriedly moved sideways to avoid him. Whoosh! Dean shuttled between the two of them. The two reacted after seeing Dean's back. They knew that they had dereliction of duty. They looked at each other and immediately chased after him. Although they were chasing, they felt as if they were flying backward. The distance between them and Dean's back was getting farther and farther. A moment later, Dean came to a castle in the west of the city center. 10 miles around the castle were bustling streets with pedestrians shuttling back and forth. However, there were vast fields and green hills near the castle, as well as large orchards and manors. In addition, there was a large horse farm behind the castle. On the green grass, there were several workers as small as ants leading the horses. They were strolling on the grass. Dean narrowed his eyes as he saw this scene. If it wasn't for the flag above the castle, he would hardly believe that this was the place where the Earl lived. It was too simple. Although the price of the land in this area and the huge area of the horse farm required immeasurable wealth, but it gave people a very primitive feeling. It was completely different from the Golden Zone where other aristocrats lived. Dean swooped down and landed in front of the castle's main entrance. "Who is it? Who is it? Bold!" The guards behind the gate were shocked by Dean, who fell from the sky and immediately shouted angrily. Dean reached out and pushed the iron gate. The lock made a creaking sound, and the iron gate broke from the middle. He looked at the stunned guards behind the gate and said, "Is this Earl Zimming's castle?" Several guards reacted and suddenly became angry. They pulled out their swords and surrounded Dean. The reason why they were stunned was not because of Dean's casual display of power. After all, such power could be achieved by ordinary limiters. They just didn't expect that someone would dare to break into this place without saying a word. Even the big shots they knew wouldn't do this. "You dare to break into the Earl's castle? You're courting death. Take it down. Smelly boy, you're courting death." Several people immediately besieged Dean. Dean frowned slightly and walked forward. The magic wings on his back flickered slightly, and a shadow flashed by. The bodies of the guards who surrounded him froze in place, and then scattered into several pieces, their organs scattered on the ground. Dean walked along the gravel path to the front of the castle. Along the way, some maids came out with quilts to dry. Seeing Dean's strange dress, they were curious and looked at him. The defense is so weak. Dean's eyes penetrated the entire castle and found that there was only one pioneer level heat source inside. Most of the rest were hunters, and there were only 20 limiters. This was not the power that an earl should have, but it was in line with his screening criteria. "Who is it?" Several heavily armored knights rushed out of the castle and stared at Dean with vigilance. They were the first to find the abnormality at the door. "I want to see Zimming," Dean said. "If you want to visit the Earl, you need to get his invitation or wait for us to inform you." Several knights looked at Dean coldly. If they didn't feel that Dean's strength was extraordinary, they would have taken him down directly. Dean noticed that the only pioneer in the castle also noticed the movement here and rushed over. He didn't immediately make a move, but waited quietly. Several knights saw that Dean didn't say a word, frowned, and their faces became more and more unkind. They slowly stepped forward. Whoosh! The door of the castle was suddenly blown open by the wind. An old man in a white robe floated out and landed in front of several knights. He looked up and down at Dean, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. "You are—" Several knights behind him didn't expect to alarm the old man. When they saw that he actually used honorifics to Dean, they were shocked and aghast. "Are you the only pioneer here?" Dean looked at the old man in front of him and asked casually. The old man's eyes moved slightly, and he said with a smile, "I'm usually alone. I don't know who you are. How come I have never seen you?" Dean said indifferently, "You haven't seen me, but you should have heard of me. 3 days ago, my invitation letter was sent to your Earl, inviting him to attend my inauguration ceremony. Why hasn't he replied so far?" The old man was startled and suddenly froze. You are... Why didn't he tell you about this?" Dean looked at him. The old man reacted and hurriedly said, No, the Earl has mentioned this to me, but the Earl has been ill recently. so it's inconvenient for him to attend. Please forgive me." As he spoke, cold sweat seeped out of his wrinkled face. Chapter 798. The old man's face was ugly. If it was other pioneers, even if he knew he was no match for them, he would not let them be so rude. But 3 days ago, the Earl had told him about the changes in King City. He knew that the youth in front of him was not just a verbal threat. Even the princess was defeated by him, and now her whereabouts were unknown. If they resisted, they were likely to be killed by him. The knights behind him clenched their fists angrily, but they did not dare to say anything. After thinking for a moment, the old man said to Dean, "Please wait for a moment. I will go and ask the Earl." "Don't let me wait too long," Dean said coldly. The old man turned and quickly entered the castle. After 7 or 8 minutes, when Dean was a little tired of waiting, his figure quickly rushed out of the castle and came to Dean. He smiled and said, "Sir, the Earl's body has improved a lot. When your enthronement ceremony begins, he will definitely be present." Dean had previously seen the old man go into the castle to discuss with another ordinary heat source. He knew that that person was Shiming. He nodded slightly and said, "Remember to let Shiming issue an edict to the whole city that the traitor Yulita is wanted. In addition, I don't want any bad rumors to spread in this city. Otherwise, the next time I come, I won't say hello to you first." The old man looked embarrassed and said, "Yes, yes." Dean no longer delayed and turned to leave. Watching Dean's back disappear into the horizon, the old man retracted his gaze and felt relieved. Previously, when he stood in front of Dean, he felt like he was facing a terrifying monster. The killing intent naturally exuded from the boy made his heart tremble. Even if they didn't fight, he knew that he was not Dean's opponent. This made him afraid, but also a trace of loneliness. "Sir, who is this person? What enthronement ceremony? And also the arrest of Princess Yulita? Her Highness is the princess. If we arrest her, won't we be offending our superiors?" The knights saw Dean leave and immediately angrily said to the old man. The old man turned to look at them and sighed. Now the world has changed. Her Highness was defeated by this person and seized the throne. Now her whereabouts are unknown. Before the Wall Lord comes back, we can only pretend to surrender. I hope the Wall Lord will not blame us." The knights were dumbfounded, their faces filled with astonishment. A few hours later, Dean arrived at another Earl city. He flew into the city and killed the guards who came to stop him. He flew all the way and soon arrived in the sky above a bustling street in the center of the city. Someone on the ground seemed to have noticed him, looking up and pointing at him. Dean flew down and landed in front of the castle on the hillside behind the busy street. The castle was a large manor. A large number of servants were pruning fruit trees in the manor. There were hundreds of guards patrolling around the manor. He landed directly in the manor and landed in front of one of the largest buildings. The 10 knights in silver armor in front of the building were shocked when they saw Dean. They immediately pulled out their guns and shouted, "Who are you? How dare you trespass the Earl's manor?" The surrounding guards were alarmed and immediately surrounded him. Dozens of spears were pointed at Dean. "Tell Visitlin to come out and see me," Dudian ordered. The surrounding dozens of guards were instantly enraged. One of them waved his hand and shouted, "Take him down." The crowd immediately swarmed forward. Whoosh! A shadow flashed, and all the knights froze in place. The next moment, the spears in their hands were broken and fell to the ground. Their arms that were holding the spears also fell to the ground. Blood flowed out from the broken arms. They didn't have time to scream in horror as their bodies fell down with the wind. In the blink of an eye, a pile of neatly cut stones surrounded Dean. Blood quickly flowed out from the stones and dyed the stairs red. A large number of warm viscera rolled out and slid to the ground along with the viscous blood. The solemn front of the door instantly turned into purgatory. Dean looked calm. His body was still in the original position. He didn't move an inch. The blood slowly spread to his feet and dyed the soles of his shoes red. A middle-aged man with very long hair and a handsome face rushed out from the back of the building. His hair was scattered over his shoulders. He was wearing a dirty robe, which was stained with colorful paint. He looked like a painter who lived at home for a long time. But at the moment, he exuded a powerful momentum. It was as if a boulder had landed in front of Dean. The stairs slightly trembled and a few cracks appeared on them. Dean calmly looked at him. "My name is Dean. Let Visit Lynn come out to see me." "Who the hell are you? You dare to kill my people? Go to hell." The middle-aged man looked at the broken corpses around Dean. There was anger in his eyes as he roared and punched. Dean frowned slightly. He didn't expect this person to be so hot-tempered. His body slightly swayed, his nails scratched, and like a phantom, he circled behind the middle-aged man. His raised arm was naturally put down, and his fingertips were dripping with blood. The middle-aged man who rushed towards him had a huge hole in his back, which happened to be the position of his heart. The next moment, the middle-aged man fell to the ground. At this time, several other figures rushed over and saw the middle-aged man lying dead on the ground. "Let Visit Lynn come out to see me," Dean repeated again. One of the women with a plump figure and a dignified face said in a cold voice, "Are you the Dean who took advantage of the chaos to attack the king's city? Since you are here, don't think about leaving." Dean slightly raised his eyes. "So, the Earl has told you about me?" "Of course. The Earl is deeply regretful that he couldn't go to the king's city to help His Highness kill the traitor. Since you took the initiative to come to the king's city, we will accept your head on behalf of His Highness." The woman's body was covered with a black substance. She stimulated the demonic body and rushed towards Dean like a half-human, half-scorpion monster. "Stupid." Dean's eyes revealed a deep color as he stimulated his demonic body. Terrifying sharp limbs grew out of his body and exuded monstrous demonic power. In an instant, the light in front of the castle gate dimmed. Whoosh! Blood sputtered and limbs flew in the air. There was no fighting scene. It was a complete one-sided massacre. Screams echoed. The half-human, half-scorpion woman was the first to bear the brunt. One of them was beheaded by Dean. The door of the castle was smashed and blood spread inside. Half a day later, the news of Visit Lynn's death spread to all the cities and caused an uproar. All the nobles in the city, from the count to the viscount, were shocked. It must be known that even if the Wall Lord came back, he wouldn't kill the count for no reason. Even if there was a clear crime, but the other counts would vote for it. After all, they weren't fake nobles like the ones in the outer wall. They were the counts who were rewarded by the kingdom of God. Although they didn't have the ability to connect to the kingdom of God, but as long as the kingdom of God existed, their status would be guaranteed. However, Dean's violent actions of killing Visit Lynn and massacring his manor was like a heavy slap to the nobles' faces. "Elder, there is news that several counts have publicly issued a condemnation. They are ready to unite with other nobles to attack the king's city," Saul carefully reported to Dean in the palace. He had expected such a possibility. He was afraid that the nobles would once again provoke Dean and cause him to kill them. Chapter 799. Saul was relieved when he saw that Dudeen didn't care about the counts. But he felt sad. It seemed that no one in the giant wall could stop Dudeen unless the wall leader came back. But when would the wall leader come back? How would the wall leader deal with him after he came back? Saul felt bitter in his heart. These things made him worried, but he was helpless. He looked at Dudeen and saw that Dudeen didn't notice him. He said, "Elder, these famous poets and musicians are eccentric and arrogant. What if they refuse to do so? Then kill them." Saul's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly said, "Sir, if we kill them, I'm afraid it will arouse public anger. Many civilians may not have any impression of His Highness, but these famous poets and musicians have a large number of fans, and they're scattered among different groups and professions. Moreover, even if we threaten them with death, some people may not be willing to bow down. As far as I know, there was a noble who used his life to threaten a musician to go to his house to play solo. The result was that the musician refused. Later, the noble was ready to use force. The result was that another count who liked the musician knew about this matter. Dudeen slightly waved his hand and interrupted Saul's words. "Not kill them. Kill their loved ones or lovers. There are many people in this world who don't care about themselves, but they cherish the people around them. If a person doesn't want to bow down to their loved ones, then kill them. Do it cleanly. What's so strange about people dying these days? Saul was startled. This was indeed an effective way. However, most people couldn't bear to kill innocent people. But this kind of emotion didn't seem to exist in Dudian. He looked at Dudian and suddenly thought, if you kidnap your loved ones, then wouldn't you be able to pinch your weakness? But seeing Dudian's indifferent expression, he quickly dispelled this idea. He felt that some people didn't belong to this category of people, and Dudian was in front of him. Is there any problem? Dudian asked. Saul recovered and bowed. No, I'll try my best. It better be so. A few days after Dean killed Visit Lynn, many nobles came to King's City to submit invitations. They were ready to attend Dean's coronation ceremony. There were even 2 counts among them. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey was completely within Dean's expectation. But there was still no reply from the Monster Institute. He could only ask Saul to write to the Monster Institute again to see what their attitude was. At the same time, Dean let the nobles who had surrendered to him sing praises of his positive image in their respective territories. He had killed his way into the palace and left corpses everywhere. Now he had to forget about the means of seizing the power of the king. Although he had no intention to manage the giant wall, but considering that he might be the ruler of the giant wall for a few years, it was better to have a positive image. Other than singing his praises, they naturally also wanted Yulida. Through the connections of the nobles, Dean could gather famous people from all walks of life to create public opinion. As the saying goes, 3 people make a tiger. Even if it was false, it would slowly become true. After all, in a situation where electricity wasn't widespread, this world's information transmission speed was still rather primitive. Even though hunters existed, producing a matching and highly effective intelligence system, compared to the olden era's real-time transmission speed of a phone call several thousand li away, it was still too slow. In addition, highly effective information transmission often only existed within great powers. Ordinary civilians could only rely on newspapers, birds, mailmen, and other methods to transmit information. Dean stayed in the palace for a few days. He was familiar with the affairs of the palace, so he temporarily handed over the management of the palace to Saul. He returned to the second base in the outer wall to pick up Aisha. At the same time, he brought Sergei, Gwyneth, and other close confidants to the inner wall. In addition, he was ready to take Mason and Zach to the inner wall to hone them. In addition to people, Dean was also going to migrate the second base to the inner wall. He was going to bring the old employees who were producing solar power components back to the inner wall. He was going to increase the scale of solar power production as soon as possible. This was his biggest reliance, and it was the most lethal weapon he could make at the moment. As long as the power was enough, then the power could be infinite. Even the Abyss Walkers could be directly turned into slag. All the nobles were looking forward to the return of the Wall Lord. It was a constant reminder that the Wall Lord was his biggest threat. It's a pity that I would be the king if the giant wall was handed over to me. I would be able to popularize electricity and let this place enter the new century as soon as possible. Dean stood in the palace and looked at the huge world. There was some regret in his heart. He might be able to fulfill his father's last wish if he didn't have the Wall Lord and the Wall Lord. Even if there were only survivors in the world, he was confident that he could lead them to break the giant wall and expel all the monsters from the earth. But things didn't go as he wished. He had exhausted all means to get to this point. He was doomed to not be able to stay for long. Even if he could kill the Wall Lord and even the messenger of the kingdom of God who would come to visit next time. But after 10 or 20 years, the kingdom of God would be aware of the abnormality. Although he would have enough electricity to easily electrocute the Abyss Walkers, but he didn't know what kind of strong people or weapons were in the unknown kingdom of God. But he felt that the kingdom of God wouldn't be as primitive as the giant wall. At least in the eyes of the supreme ruler of the kingdom of God, it wasn't a rare thing. Therefore, even if he had the confidence to fight against all the monsters in the giant wall, but he didn't have the confidence to contend against the kingdom of God. He felt that it was ridiculous. What he was most afraid of wasn't the monsters outside the giant wall, but the other group of people who were living a better life. Saul, ask the Rock, Wind, and Dragon clans to come up with a legendary magic mark each. Dean said to Saul, tell them if they can't come up with it, then let their patriarchs come to see me in person. Saul was stunned for a moment. His face suddenly became bitter. Dean was giving him a difficult problem. Elder, the number of legendary magic marks is scarce. Even the devil families may not be able to come up with so many at once. Moreover, if we force them to come up with legendary magic marks, it will force them to rebel. The gains are not worth the losses. Elder, you already have legendary magic marks. Moreover, it is the splitter magic mark, which is far more powerful than theirs. If you want to replace it, then it will be too much of a loss. Chapter 800. Saul was dumbfounded and smiled bitterly in his heart. He had seen several companions brought by Dean. Their strength was average, but now it seemed that Dean intended to cultivate them with all his strength. This meant that after his companions gradually became familiar with the affairs of King City, he, the newly appointed Grand Master, might have to abdicate. If it was just not being put in an important position, he could accept it, but he was afraid of being killed directly. Dean glanced at him. Since you have pledged allegiance to me, then you have to think about me in the future. If you want to live longer, then assist me. Maybe when the Wall Lord returns, I will have the strength to fight against the Wall Lord. In that case, you can continue to live well, right? Saul smiled in his heart. It was almost impossible to rely on the resources here to grow to the level of the abyss. But he understood the meaning behind Dean's words. I know. I'll write a letter to them. Go. Dean looked at Noise, Sergei, Gwyneth, and Aurora after Saul left. He looked at Gwyneth. Gwyneth, I promised you that I would avenge you when you followed me. Now I have done it. It doesn't matter if your enemy is a commander of the king's city or an earl or a noble. No one will dare to stop you. Sergei, Noise, and others looked at Gwyneth with curiosity in their eyes. Gwyneth had a complex look on her face. She remembered the time when Dean took her out of the Thornflower prison. She didn't expect that her wish would come true in the blink of an eye. She never thought that she would be able to stand in the palace. She was just a Punisher. There were many Punishers like her in the inner wall, but her fate was completely different from the other Punishers. She was destined to be different from the moment she was imprisoned. Her life seemed to have entered another turning point after she was released from the prison. She knew how much time it took for Dean to climb to the position he had today. She knew how many innocent lives he had killed in the process. She didn't agree with the values she learned in the monastery. Even if she had experienced inhuman torture in the prison, she didn't change her mind. She only hated her enemies, but she still loved the world. She also knew about Dean's experience, but she felt that she and Dean were two different types of people, and they were mutually exclusive. From the bottom of her heart, she thought that sooner or later, an evil person like Dean would end up miserably and eventually fail and lose everything. Regardless of whether it was poetry or folk tales passed down by word of mouth, evil would never prevail over good. However, at this moment, her belief was somewhat shaken. Especially when she heard Dudian's words of the moment, she suddenly felt guilty. If Dudian hadn't killed so many innocent people, hadn't done so many bad things, he wouldn't have reached today's status and wouldn't have been able to avenge her. How could she blame him? Although she rejected such a method, but her conscience didn't allow her to have any dissatisfaction or contempt towards him. Thank you, young master. She lowered her head and whispered. Dean's eyes lit up. Don't mention it. There's one more thing I want to tell you. Although I have seized the inner wall by luck and can temporarily rule this place by force, but I don't know when the Wall Lord will return. I can escape if he comes back, but you will suffer. So if you're willing to leave, then I will arrange people to erase your previous identity. You will have a new identity and live as an ordinary person. Gwyneth was stunned. Sergei and Noise were also stunned. They knew that Dean needed trustworthy people by his side, but they didn't expect that he would give them the opportunity to choose. Sergei's heart rippled as he was touched by Dean's deceitful actions. Young master, you gave me my life. Without you, I would still be in that dark prison. If the Wall Lord comes back and you can't defeat him, I'm willing to buy time for you. There was a trace of moisture in Noyce's eyes as he said seriously, "Scar and I vowed to follow you. He has sacrificed himself for you and fulfilled his promise. How can I go against it?" Dean looked at him. The indifference in his eyes was slightly gentle. He nodded and said, "Thank you." When Sergei saw Noyce, the hesitation in his heart disappeared as he said, "Noyce is right. I will always follow you, young master." Dean nodded. Aurora looked at Dean. "Master, I swear to follow you. I hope you can let me avenge my sister." Dean looked at her. "I'm afraid that your strength isn't enough if you want to take revenge by yourself. Wait for Saul to get back the legendary magic marks and replace them for you." Aurora's eyes were full of surprise. She knelt down and kowtowed. "Master, Aurora is willing to follow you. Get up." Dean stretched out his hand. Gwyneth looked at Dean. "Master, although I have some opinions about you before, but I am willing to continue to follow you until the end of my life." Dean looked at her and nodded. He knew that Gwyneth had opinions about him, but he still kept Gwyneth by his side. She had a firm outlook on life. If it was an average person who had gone through so many hardships, then they would be full of hatred. But Gwyneth wasn't like that. So he believed that as long as he gave her enough kindness, he would be able to exchange for her loyalty. Sergei and Gwyneth's strength wasn't enough in his eyes, but he didn't intend to replace them. After all, it was easy to find strong people, but hard to find loyalty. Moreover, with the resources in his hands, it wouldn't take long to train them to be pioneers. 2 days later, Dragon Clan and Rock Clan sent a legendary parasitic soul worm each. Dragon Clan didn't send the demonic dragon, but the legendary shadow hunter, which Dean had seen before. What the Rock race had given him was the Gold Eater magic mark, which had been passed down from generation to generation in the Rock race. The Gold Eater magic mark was good at burrowing into the ground and could survive underground for a long time. It could eat metal and rocks as food, and its digestive and defensive abilities were top-notch. There is no reply from the Wing family. "Sir, what do you think?" Saul peeked at Dean. "It seems that our Royal Highness Yulida should be in the Wing clan." Dean narrowed his eyes slightly. Chapter 801. Your Majesty, do you need me to send someone to the Wing family? Saul asked. Dean glanced at him. Who should we send? You? Who can stop Yulida? Or should I send someone to alert the snake? Saul's heart skipped a beat. I don't dare. Send the order to the Wing family. Let them immediately put up a notice in King's City to arrest Yulida. If they don't comply with the order within 3 days, they will be punished with the crime of rebellion. In addition, ask them to come up with another legendary parasitic soul worm. Dean said coldly. Saul's face slightly changed. Yes, Your Majesty. Dean asked Noyce to follow Saul to familiarize him with the affairs of the palace. He also asked Sergei to go back to the outer wall to summon Richelieu, Hawkeye, and their cronies to the inner wall. He asked them to contact the royal family's network. He was ready to completely control the inner wall as soon as possible. It wasn't the first time that Richelieu came to the inner wall, but it was the first time that he came to the palace. He found it unbelievable. Dean had threatened to attack the inner wall when he took away the position of pontiff. But Richelieu thought that it was a joke. After all, there were many masters in the inner wall. Richelieu didn't know how many of them there were in the inner wall. He knew that the big shots could crush Dean with just a finger. But in a blink of an eye, this bizarre thing became true. It was like a miracle. He didn't know whether he should be happy or sad. But from Dean's performance, his heart settled down. He knew that Dean didn't plan to kill him. He thought about it carefully. His previous worries were completely superfluous. Now that the royal power was in Dean's hands, why would he need to kill him? Even if he revealed all the things in the past, what kind of threat could he pose? Everything will become a bubble after the Wall Lord returns. But my life has long been tied with him. It's good to enjoy such a life before I die. Richelieu comforted himself. Hawkeye, Sword King, and other elders of the Dark Church were excited. In their hearts, the inner wall was an unattainable existence. They had fantasized about the scenery of the inner wall countless times. But today they were able to see it in the highest power center of the inner wall. It was incredible for them to be able to see it in the palace. The Dark Church will maintain the style of the Dark Church in the future. The monastery will play tricks in the outer wall too. The monastery doesn't have the ability to do this, but we do. Dean said to Hawkeye and other elders of the Dark Church, the royal family will provide you with rare magic marks for free. You can take as much God's marrows as you need. You must improve your strength as soon as possible. You have 1 month to let the people of the inner wall know of your existence. You also need to know about the matters of the cities here, including the color of the underwear that the Earl's daughter likes to wear. Do you understand? Hawkeye and other elders were dumbfounded. They felt the pressure, but with the support of the royal power, there was still hope to achieve this. No one dared to shake their head. Time passed quickly. 2 days later, the Wing family sent back the news that Eureka was wanted in the territory of the Wing family. This statement meant that they had surrendered. At the same time, they also submitted a legendary parasitic soulworm, a bat whisperer, and 5 rare parasitic soulworms. Together with the Winged family's envoy, they personally came to the palace to apologize to Dean, earnestly complained, and begged for forgiveness. Dean didn't continue to pressure them. He let Saul send away the Winged family's envoy. Among the 3 legendary parasitic soulworms, Dean gave the Shadow Hunter to Aurora, the Rock family's Gold Eater to Noise, and the Wing family's Bat Whisperer. Originally, he planned to give it to Gwyneth, but considering that Gwyneth was sometimes soft-hearted, he was worried that she would hear some secrets, but because it would involve too many innocent people, she didn't report it. Unfortunately, Glenn isn't here. Dean sighed in his heart. Glenn was a friend of his. They first met after he was released from prison. Mellon Consortium had sent her to assassinate him, but she had let him go. It could be regarded as a life-saving grace. Use this God's marrows to your limit every day. Don't overdo it, and don't overdo it. According to Dr. Xiao Manson's estimation, Aurora will become a pioneer in about 2 months. Remember to hone your fighting skills. I'll let people build the hunter tools for you as soon as possible. Aurora, you should go outside the giant wall to hone your fighting skills. Dean said to Aurora. Aurora's eyes lit up. She was no longer an ignorant little girl. She knew that the pioneers were the top masters in the inner wall. Moreover, the number of pioneers in the inner wall had been greatly reduced. If she was promoted to the level of pioneer, then she would be regarded as a relatively strong force. Noyce looked at Dean. Master, what about me? You stay with me. I'll find someone to practice with you. Dean looked at him. The inner wall isn't completely pacified yet. It's inevitable that there will be rebels who want to assassinate me. They don't have the strength to do so they can only use poison. I'll have to rely on you to taste my food. Noyce felt helpless. Although his magic marks had upgraded from rare to legendary, but his job didn't change. He was still a poison tester for Dean. Saul, is there any news from the Monster Institute? Dean looked at Saul. Saul bowed. There's no news yet, but you asked me to send people to extract the God's marrows. They have given it to us. They have given us the God's marrows. Dean pondered for a moment, sent a letter to them, and tell them to post the wanted notice of Princess Eureka. Also send people to King City to build the hunter tools for us. Also tell them that King City will provide them with a lot of convenience in the future to facilitate their research. If they need, we can send them another city. Elder, are you going to use carrot and stick? Saul pondered for a moment and said, Elder, I have some questions and would like to ask you. With your strength, you can directly suppress the Monster Research Institute and make them surrender. They won't be able to compete with you. In addition to the Thorny Claw Dragon Serpent Monster, there is no one else in the Monster Research Institute who can match you. Even if it is the Serpent Monster, you can completely kill it with your strength. Why do you need to use force to subdue it? Dean glanced at him. I have a lot of things that I need their cooperation in the future. It would be best if they can take the initiative to surrender. If they're subdued by force, there will inevitably be old grudges. Do you have any opinion on the Monster Institute? Saul bowed his head and said, I don't dare. It's just that when I was studying with my teacher, I heard that the Wall Lord and the Princess are deliberately suppressing the Monster Research Institute. I don't know if this news is true or not, but for so many years, the Monster Research Institute has made a lot of contributions but the reward given by the Wall Lord is very ordinary. Once something goes wrong, the punishment will be doubled. This is a bit strange. So I think that if you give the Monster Research Institute a city and provide them with convenience, I am afraid that the Monster Research Institute will go out of your control. Is that true? Dean was surprised. So you think that the Wall is suppressing the Monster Institute because they are afraid that their development will become uncontrollable? Saul didn't speak, but his attitude was tacit. Dean's fingers touched the throne as he thought. The Monster Research Institute was a place that specialized in the study of monsters and related things. What was the most dangerous thing in the old era? The answer was undoubtedly the researchers. Even if a stupid ruler tried to launch a global war, he may not be able to destroy the Earth. But the researchers could. This was the horror of the researchers. The Wall Lord was aware of this, so he suppressed them. It seems that the Monster Institute didn't have a good time before. Dean thought of the first time he sneaked into the inner wall. He saw the Monster Institute grazing monsters in the wasteland. The experiments of the Monster Institute would not only bring panic to civilians, but also fear and disgust to the nobles. Moreover, the Wall Lord would be afraid of them. All of these things showed that the Monster Institute had done something that would shock the world. Has the Monster Institute created any disasters? Dean asked Saul. Saul was startled. Yes, and more than once. 200 years ago, there was no side wall at that time. There was harmony in the inner wall. Later on, the Monster Institute had a research accident and leaked the undead virus. The result was a large-scale infection. The situation was more terrible than the outbreak of undead in the inner wall. There were more than 20 million people in the inner wall at that time, but the number was reduced to 12 million after the virus leak. More than 8 million people died. The Psi Wall was built at that time. The purpose was to isolate the undead infected by the virus. Dean's eyes slightly moved. There is more. The second time was 100 years ago. The Monster Research Institute created a terrifying monster. The Wall Lord tried his best to kill the monster, but the Wall Lord was seriously injured and later died. The Wall Lord is the father of the current Wall Lord, Aristotle. That's why the Wall Lord suppressed the Monster Research Institute. If the Monster Research Institute was allowed to continue their research, they might create something even more terrifying, Saul said. Chapter 802. Was the experiment banned by the Monster Research Institute? How can the Wall Lord be sure that they have completely destroyed the data? Dean couldn't help but ask. Saul looked at Dean. Dean's question was very smart. He wasn't stupid enough to ask whether the experiment still existed. He was completely standing in the ruler's point of view. He said, the Wall Lord banned the experiment and completely destroyed the Monster Research Institute. All the people were killed, including their relatives and friends. Even the people who came in contact with the Monster Research Institute during the experiment or the people who communicated with other Monster Research Institute were executed. This incident caused a sensation at the time, and the data from the experiment was completely erased, leaving nothing behind. Although some people have tried to revive this experiment and recreate this monster in recent years, they were all strangled in the bud. Dean sighed. There was some regret in his heart. The situation was the same as he thought. If it was him, he would have done the same thing. If the Monster Research Institute wasn't placed here by the kingdom of God, then he would have uprooted the institute and destroyed everything. Aristotle probably had the same idea, but he didn't dare to go too far because there was the kingdom of God above him. The Monster Research Institute has recently researched a monster called Dark Prison. You should know about it. The potential of this monster is very strong. I estimate that it can trap the ruler or even the abyss. Is the monster that was created in the past related to this? Dudian asked. Saul shook his head and said, I know about the Black Prison. It is a task from the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God assigned the Monster Research Institute to make something. It is said that the kingdom of God will come to take over the research after it is made. Therefore, the Wall Lord cannot stop this experiment. Moreover, the Black Prison is different from the monster of the past. The Black Prison is lazy and has little destructive power. However, it is said that the monster was violent and extremely bloodthirsty. It caused a lot of casualties. Moreover, The Black Prison is not a research task assigned by the Kingdom of God. The Kingdom of God came to take over Dark Prison? Dean was surprised. He immediately asked, "How long is the production cycle of Dark Prison?" Saul saw the change in Dudian's face and knew what he was worried about. "Elder, don't worry. As far as I know, the materials needed for Dark Prison is extremely huge. Although there are many families that supply them with materials, but it is very difficult for the family to plunder the materials. It will take at least 7 or 8 years to produce a complete Dark Prison. This is what Princess Eureka told me. Elder can ask the Monster Institute for more accurate information." Dean was relieved. Aristotle had left for more than 6 years. If the cycle of the Dark Prison was 8 years, then it would take at least 2 years for him to return. However, he had to ask Siam Anson about the specific time before he would return. "How much do you know about the monster?" Dudian asked. Saul shook his head. "I only heard about it from others. I don't know much about it. However, I heard a rumor that the monster was half human." "Half of them?" Dean was startled. He suddenly thought of another experiment of the Monster Research Institute. Insect Man. The human and the monster's body were mixed together. The human would be the leader, and the monster's body would be dominated. Saul looked at Dean's expression and faintly guessed what he was thinking. He knew that he couldn't be too smart, so he asked, "Elder, what are you thinking about?" Dean frowned. "I am thinking that the Monster Research Institute has an experiment on Insect Man. Is it an imitation of the monster experiment? Didn't Aristotle forbid the Insect Man experiment?" Saul smiled and said, "Sir, the Bugman experiment was assigned to the Monster Research Institute when the emissaries from the Kingdom of God came a few times before. It is different from the original monster experiment. The Bugman experiment has not had any major riots so far, and most of the Bugmen are average in strength. It is said that 99% of the test subjects died because they could not adapt to the monster body." Again, the Kingdom of God? Dean frowned. Using a mixture of human and monster's body for experiments. What kind of things were they trying to research? This kind of experiment that destroys humanity is issued by the Kingdom of God. They have the nerve to call themselves the Kingdom of God. There was a trace of coldness in Dean's eyes. Saul had a rare feeling of approval in his heart when he heard Dean's words. He had the same idea when he first learned about this matter, but he didn't dare to say it. After all, it was the Kingdom of God that was above the giant wall. Even the ruler of the wall didn't dare to talk about it. He said, "Don't let the people of the Monster Research Institute hear about it. Otherwise, when the messenger of the Kingdom of God comes, there will be a disaster." "I know this." Dean's eyes were cold and arrogant. "If there is a chance, I would like to see what these people are doing behind the scenes." Saul smiled slightly. He thought that he was still a teenager. He said, "Elders shouldn't be too serious. There are many things in this world that don't make sense. If you are too serious, you will only add to your troubles." Dean glanced at him. "You see it very well." Saul laughed. "That's why I will submit to Elder. I'm not like some stubborn people. Too casual life is boring. But I like to be direct. Talk to me like this." Dean didn't get angry. Instead, he praised him. Saul lowered his head and didn't speak. Dean looked at the outside of the palace. There was a trace of heat in his eyes. He knew about the monster experiment from Saul's mouth. If the Monster Research Institute could create such a monster, then even if he couldn't control it, he could use it as a bomb and throw it into other giant wall or even the Kingdom of God. It would cause a large number of casualties. However, he knew that this matter was very difficult. After all, hundreds of years had passed, and Aristotle couldn't destroy the Monster Research Institute, so he couldn't sleep at night. Only by erasing everything related to the Monster Research Institute would he be able to regain his peace of mind. After so many years, it would undoubtedly be extremely difficult to reconstruct the destroyed experimental data. He didn't know if the Monster Research Institute had ever thought of resurrecting such a big killing machine after so many years. If there was, then the Monster Research Institute might have been secretly collecting relevant experimental data. However, the Monster Research Institute might not be a whole. Even if someone collected the data, it might be an individual or a small group of people who were close to them. Finding the people who were secretly collecting monsters for their experiments would most likely be an extremely arduous and time-consuming task. Dean fell into contemplation. After a long time, he suddenly sobered up. Although the temptation was great, but the immediate priority was to find the resurrection of Aisha as soon as possible. He wanted to slap himself for ignoring the most important thing for the time being. He was a little annoyed. He turned to look at Aisha, who was sitting quietly next to him. His eyes were full of apology. "I'm sorry. I'll go to the Monster Research Institute now," Dean said in a guilty tone. Saul looked at the sudden change in Dean's mood. He was a little surprised. He couldn't help but say, "Elder, didn't you tell me to send a letter to the Monster Research Institute? Are you going now?" "No need to send a letter. I'll go myself." Dean stood up. His eyes were full of killing intent. "I've given them enough time." Chapter 803. Is there anything else in the Monster Research Institute besides the stone-clawed dragon snake? Dean asked Saul, although the answer might not be true, but it could be used as a reference. Hundreds of years ago, the Monster Research Institute was able to create a monster that could rival the Wall Lord. It was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be any other experiments. Some means of killing the enemy were not only revealed during the attack, but also during the defense. Saul looked at Dudian and thought for a moment, although I haven't been to the Monster Research Institute, but there should be a lot of traps. If you can, I suggest that you don't go there by yourself. These traps have been accumulated for a long time, and the destructive power is no less than the traps under the palace. The group of invaders didn't get any benefits from the traps under the palace. Dudian knew that Saul was not lying. Eureka had proposed to lead the invaders to the Monster Research Institute's Mount St. Lucia during the conference. But the proposal was rejected because the possibility of failure was too high. The invaders had been lurking in the giant wall for a long time, and since they knew the location of the real god's corpse, it meant that they had consulted a lot of information. In the history of the giant wall, Mount St. Lucia had been the site of several battles. 2 of them were caused by experimental monsters that went out of control and rammed into the mountain. As a result, they triggered a series of traps and rotted to death. Besides the traps, what else is there? Dudian asked again. Saul was surprised to see Dudian's indifferent face. It seemed that he didn't care about the traps at all. He was surprised because even the Wall Lord was not willing to go to the Monster Research Institute in person. Besides the traps, there doesn't seem to be anything else. Although the director of the Monster Research Institute has shown that his strength is only that of an ordinary pioneer, but in fact, it's not that high. At most, he can barely compete with the masters of the inner wilderness. He has been immersed in research for many years and has no time to practice his fighting skills. Don't worry too much. The only thing to pay attention to is the traps and the stone-clawed dragon snake. This monster's venom is very fierce. It is ranked 3rd on the Monster Illustrated Handbook. The second is the green-toed dart frog, which paralyzed the only dominator among the invaders for many days. If the dominator's magic mark didn't have a high poison resistance, he would have been poisoned to death on the spot. Dudian heard the ranking of the poisonous creatures for the first time. He couldn't help but ask, what is the first one? Number 1 is the Dream Breeder, which is also the number 1 legendary monster. Saul said without thinking. The Dream Breeder is different from the green-toed dart frog. The latter is not a monster with a name. There are no parasitic soul worms in its body. Even a fully matured green-toed dart frog has very weak fighting power. It can barely compete with monsters of level 20 to 30. But if it doesn't use poison, most monsters of level 20 can easily kill it and make it a delicious meal. But if it is shot by its venom, even monsters of level 50 or 60 will die on the spot. But in terms of poison, the Dream Breeder not only surpasses the green-toed dart frog by a few times, or even a dozen times, but it also has extremely strong fighting power. Even if we exclude the poison attack, it is still outstanding in terms of speed, strength, defense, and other aspects. Especially its ability to resist poison. It is close to the level of immunity to all poisons. Unfortunately, this legendary monster only appeared in a very long time ago, and no one has seen it since then. I don't know whether it is true or not, but the other 7 legendary monsters have been seen. So although this dream breeder is extremely powerful according to the rumors, it should be a real monster. Dudian was a little surprised. He didn't expect this dream breeder to be stronger than the green-toe dart frog. That little thing could paralyze a ruler and completely lose its fighting power. If this dream breeder was stronger than it, wouldn't it be even more terrifying? No wonder it was ranked first among the legendary monsters. According to this dream breeder was estimated to be more than 10 times more terrifying than the second-ranked executioner. The green-toed dart frog in the trap under the palace is provided by the Monster Research Institute. Although it is said that there is only one, no one knows whether the rumors are true or not. Because of this reason, His Majesty has never personally gone to the headquarters of the Monster Research Institute. So, sir, please think twice. Saul bowed his head and said sincerely. Du Jian's eyes flashed for a moment, and he shook his head. It doesn't matter. I'm going. You take care of the palace for the time being. After saying that, without waiting for Saul to continue to persuade, the splitter on his back grew a pair of magic wings from the gap of the armor, and he soared into the sky like a black magic light breaking through the sky. Saul was a little dumbfounded. Until Du Jian's figure disappeared in the sky, he smiled bitterly. After all, he was young and vigorous. A few hours later, Du Jian came to Mount St. Lucia. Looking down from the sky, the whole mountain was extremely majestic. Behind the mountain was connected to a smaller mountain, which was densely covered with forests. On the top of the mountain, ancient castle buildings and winding steps could be faintly seen. He calmly landed in front of the mountain. The 4 guards in front of the mountain saw Du Jian descending from the sky and immediately became alert. When they sensed the powerful aura exuding from Du Jian, they immediately knew that he was a big shot. One of the guards respectfully said, "This is the headquarters of the Monster Research Institute. May I ask who you are?" "Go and inform that Warlord Du Jian has come to see you. Let Olava come out to see me." Du Jian ordered. The 4 guards were stunned, and then their eyes widened. The news of Du Jian occupying the palace was not a day or two. It had already spread to various cities. Naturally, they also heard about it from their friends. They did not expect that the mysterious person who had stirred up a storm recently was in front of them. "Sir, our dean said that if you come to visit, you can go in directly." One of the guards reacted first and said respectfully. Du Jian slightly raised his eyebrows, said, "Let him personally come out and invite me." The guard was slightly stunned and looked up at Du Jian. He saw that Du Jian did not seem to be joking, and his face suddenly had a trace of strange color, said, "Sir, our dean is very busy." "I'm afraid this." Du Jian's eyes flashed coldly. "Are you the dean or the dean's assistant? Can your words replace his words? I asked you to go and inform, not to discuss with me here." The guard's face changed as he felt the cold, killing intent in Du Jian's eyes. He didn't dare to say more, and bowed his head, turned around, and quickly ran away. Du Jian quietly waited, and at the same time looked around. Nowadays, the range of his X-ray vision had become extremely wide, and he could see things thousands of meters underground. Naturally, the penetrating distance of his thermal vision was even wider. Almost all the lives in the entire Mount St. Lucia were in his eyes, including the guard who quickly ran down the stairs to inform. The fiery figure in his eyes was getting farther and farther away. On the mountain, there were also large and small heat sources, many of which looked like humans, surrounding some huge and strange heat sources. It seemed that a group of researchers were studying monsters. He searched for a while and found that he did not see the stone-clawed dragon snake that Saul had mentioned. It should be a cold-blooded monster. There are 4 pioneers, and 2 of them are military god level. One of them has contacted the guard. It should be the dean. Saul is right. The dean is just at the peak of the outer wilderness. Dean's eyes flashed as he stared at the guard silently. Soon he saw the guard turn back alone, but the dean didn't move. Presumably, he didn't want to see the guard. He retracted his gaze, and his eyes also returned to black and white. A moment later, when the guard ran back with a head full of sweat, Du Jian did not wait for him to speak. and said, "Tell Olava, if he still has this attitude, all the branches of your Monster Research Institute will disappear before sunset today." The guard was stunned, and the other three also widened their eyes, looking at Dudeen with astonishment. Chapter 804. When the guard ran to pass the message again, it didn't take long for Dean to see Orava get up and follow the guard out. At the same time, the other three pioneers in the Institute gathered towards Orava. A moment later, Dean saw a silver-haired old man, accompanied by three pioneers in different attire, walking slowly behind the guard. His attitude looked calm and quite imposing. "Mr. Dean." Orava's eyes slightly moved when he saw Dean. This was the first time he met Dean. Even when Eureka held the crusade against the invaders meeting, he didn't participate. Instead, he let the deputy dean participate. He hadn't left Mount St. Lucia for many years. "Dean Orava?" Dean looked at him without any greeting smile on his face. He said, "Dean should know the purpose of my visit. I'll get straight to the point. First of all, cooperate with King City to arrest the criminal Eureka. Second, the Monster Institute should cooperate with the royal family like how Aristotle did in the past. Can you do these two things?" Orava's old eyes flashed with a trace of light. He quietly looked at Dean. This teenager's way of speaking was direct to the point that it was a trace of insensitivity. Moreover, there was no smile on his face. Although the smile that most people wore was also a fake smile, but the latter seemed to be unwilling to fake a smile. Such an attitude made him feel a trace of anger, but he didn't show it. He just faintly said, "Mr. Dean, I'm afraid there is something fishy about the crime of Princess Eureka. I hope you won't make a conclusion so easily." Dean said in a cold voice, "I like to get straight to the point. I don't like to be long-winded. You know what the matter of Princess Eureka is like. I came here today not to discuss with you, because you have missed the opportunity to discuss with me. I came in person to inform you that you can resist or not, but that means you are my enemy." Orava slightly frowned. Dean's tone made him feel extremely uncomfortable. If he were to use one word to describe it, then it would be overbearing or even aggressive. However, such a tough attitude also made him think about the cards in Dean's hands and the cards in their hands. After thinking for a moment, there was a trace of coldness in his eyes. He said, "Mr. Dean, since you like to talk so directly, then I advise you not to overestimate yourself. The Wall Lord will come back at any time. Leave a line for everything, and leave a line for yourself." Dean looked straight at him and said, "Are you threatening me? Do you think that with what I've done so far, the Wall Lord will forgive me when he comes back? Since there is no such thing, why can't I be ruthless? When I get the same result, killing one person is killing. Killing 10,000 people is also killing. Why should I kill until I'm satisfied? In addition, I also advise you that the Wall Lord will not come back for at least 2 years. If you don't believe me, you can go and ask Eureka. She should know what to do." Orava's face slightly changed. He naturally knew that the Wall Lord would not come back in a short time. However, Dean's words made him very uncomfortable. He knew that it was unnecessary to argue with such a madman. He said in a deep voice, "Let's not talk about when the Wall Lord will come back. Mr. Dean, before the Wall Lord comes back, you are the king. Our institute will continue to do our research. We will not care about the matter between you and Her Highness. I hope you will not interfere with us. Our institute has never liked to be involved with these things." Dean quietly stared at him. There was a trace of unnaturalness in Orava's heart. Dean slowly opened his mouth. "Dean, what gives you the confidence to talk to me like this?" Orava was stunned. The faces of the three pioneers behind him slightly changed. They looked at Dean in anger. Dean's words were quite impolite. Orava came back to his senses, and a trace of gloom appeared on his gentle face. He said, "Mr. Dean, since you have seized the palace and occupied it for so many days, you should know what kind of existence our Magical Creature Research Institute is. Even if His Majesty Aristotle was here, he wouldn't dare to touch an inch of our Magical Creature Research Institute. Don't think that no one can stop you." Dean looked at him mockingly and said, "Speaking of which, Your confidence is only because the kingdom of God is behind you. But you should not be so ignorant. There's an old saying that when you are close, you're already in my attack range. As long as I want to, I can immediately take off your head. You have no capital to negotiate with me. Arava slightly narrowed his eyes and said, Since I have come to see you, I am not afraid that you will be stupid. Even if you kill me, my institute will not surrender to you. Moreover, if you kill me, you will also die. The messenger of the kingdom of God will not let you go. My old bones in exchange for your young life is still worthwhile. Can a messenger of the kingdom of God still search the entire earth for me? Dean said coldly, After leaving this giant wall, the world is big. I can go anywhere. It is easy for people like us to change our appearance. Do you think that I will wait for the wall lord to come back and fight him? Arava faintly smiled and said, The world is very big, but both you and I have to live within the wall. Once we leave the divine wall, only death awaits us. Although you are strong, you are not even a ruler. Although the area near the divine wall is safe enough for you to live, the abyss region far away from the wasteland is a place that even the abyssal walkers have to be careful. Outside every giant wall, there is such an area surrounding it, just like the moat outside a castle. What do you have to cross over? There are thunderbirds in the sky and abyssal monsters on the ground. What do you think you can escape to? It seems that you know a lot. Dean's expression was calmer than Arava. But you have forgotten that I have colluded with the invaders. I will leave the way the invaders came. There is no way out. Where do you think my confidence comes from? Arava was stunned. After a moment, his face slightly changed. His forehead overflowed with cold sweat. He knew that Dean had helped the invaders to escape from the ambush discussed by Eureka and others. He also knew that Dean had colluded with the invaders. But he didn't think that the invaders would come up with a way to leave the giant wall and make a deal with Dean. Now that he thought about it, as Dean said, there was no way out. How could he be so confident to be able to cross the abyss and trap him here? Arava's thoughts were a little messed up. This had exceeded his expectations and caught him off guard. Furthermore, it made his previous confidence seem a little ridiculous. Since Dean planned to leave at any time and had the ability to leave, why would he be afraid of the kingdom of God behind them? Now, is the Dean still willing to cooperate? Dean looked at him with a hint of contempt in his eyes. Arava felt that his face was a bit ugly at the moment. He tried to keep calm and looked up at Dean's eyes. But what he saw was a pair of black eyes full of strong self-confidence without hesitation. The last glimmer of hope in his heart was also disillusioned. After a moment of silence, he whispered, We are willing to cooperate with you, just like we cooperated with His Majesty Aristotle. It's good that you know what's good for you. Dean looked indifferent. I will send my people over later to get something from you. Arava's face was gloomy, and he whispered, I know. Dean glanced at him and swept his eyes over the 3 pioneers behind him. He snorted coldly, turned around, and flew away from the mountain. Watching Dean leave, a middle-aged pioneer clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and said to Arava, Dean, this kid is too much. Do we really want to humiliate him? If we stay on a mountain and don't come out, what can he do to us? Arava's expression was complicated. He slowly retracted his gaze and sighed. I underestimated this person. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, it would be hard to believe that such wisdom and such a temperament are actually a teenager. The middle-aged pioneer said in a muffled voice, Dean, I don't see any wisdom in this brat. He is also childish, arrogant, and not shrewd at all. If he had a better attitude and talked to us nicely, although we wouldn't agree with him, at least he would be more sensible. How could he talk like that? He is not educated at all. Arava shook his head slightly and sighed, because he knows that we have to be humiliated, so he doesn't need to give us a good face. Instead, he has such a tough attitude, leaving us no room for maneuver. If he was polite, then this matter could be slowly delayed for a while. I thought that little Eureka was already a rare intelligent person. I didn't expect that this boy is 10 times better than her. It's hard to believe that the outer wall, where the pariahs live, can cultivate such a talent. The middle-aged pioneer felt aggrieved. Dean, why should we submit to him? We can unite Her Highness Eureka and Yi Wang to defend the Holy Mountain. What do you do to us?" Arava glanced at him and said, "Based on what you've said, he might not be able to break in, but we won't be able to get out either. Don't forget that he asked us to come out and meet him personally. This means that he knows that there are many mechanisms and traps on the Divine Mountain. The reason why the traps are powerful is because they can catch people off guard. Since he already knows, what's the point of these traps? If he can't attack us, then he can attack our branch. But after a long time, we will run out of food and water. How can we resist the sea of people?" The middle-aged pioneer was stunned and couldn't speak. "I hope that the Wall Lord will come back soon. I hope that he won't be too greedy otherwise." Arava sighed. He looked up at the direction of Dean's departure. A sharp, cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Chapter 805. Dean retracted his wings and descended from the sky in front of the palace. Saul and Noise came out to greet him. Saul glanced at Dean's body. He was surprised to find that Dean wasn't scathed. "Elder, didn't you go to the Monster Research Institute?" Dean glanced at him. "Do I need to come back with my whole body injured to be considered as having been there?" Saul was a little speechless and hurriedly said, "I didn't mean that. Arava has already surrendered. Later, send a few of the most knowledgeable professors in your royal family to bring my people to the headquarters of the Magical Creature Research Institute." Dean said as he walked towards the palace, "Tell the professors to move all the materials and books related to the undead and virus research to the palace. Also inform Alava that the people he gave you can transfer the tokens of the professors from other research institutes." Saul was stunned and said, "Olava has submitted? How is that possible? Am I joking with you?" Dean frowned as he glanced at Saul. Saul's complexion changed slightly. He hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, "This subordinate has misspoken. It's just that Arava is arrogant. Even the Wall Master might not be able to invite him in the past, let alone make him submit by force. Sir, do you think that he might be pretending to submit?" Dean waved his hand. "Don't think too much about it. Just do as I say." Saul didn't dare to say anything. "Yes." Dean looked at Noise. "Go and call Gwyneth. Tell her to go to the Monster Research Institute." "Yes, young master." Noise turned around and left. Seeing this, Saul saluted Dean and followed him. After a moment, Gwyneth was brought in front of Dean. Dean handed her a note. "Remember the questions written on it. Ask Orava himself. If he doesn't answer, then mention my name. As for whether his answer is true or false, I'm sure you will be able to see it." There was a trace of surprise in Gwyneth's eyes. She didn't expect that Dean would ask her to come for such an important task. She was born in the inner wall, so naturally she knew what kind of person Arava was. Arava was a person who was on an equal footing with the leader of the wall. His status was higher than the patriarch of the devil family. Even her boss's boss wasn't qualified to see Arava, let alone ask him questions. Moreover, he had to answer them. Soon she knew why Dean chose her to do this. She used to be a disciplinary officer and was responsible for investigating evil cultists and criminals. She had a certain ability to judge people. Sergei and Noise couldn't compare to her. Moreover, she knew that Dean lacked people, so she was the only best candidate. She took the note and looked at Aisha, who was next to Dean. She seemed to understand. "I'll do my best." "Good." Dean nodded. It didn't take long for the royal professors selected by Saul and the attendants to gather in front of the palace. The royal professors were the teachers of the children of the royal family. They had taught Eureka and some of the children of the counts who were close to the royal family. They were the most knowledgeable people in the city. Gwyneth said goodbye to Dean and led the group of people to the headquarters of the Monster Research Institute. Dean wrote down all the questions he wanted to ask and solve on the paper. Although the answers given by Arava might not be true, but he didn't expect him to fully understand the progress of the Monster Research Institute. In addition to Arava, he could also read the books and materials of the Monster Research Institute. Moreover, he could get more authentic information from other research institutes. It was enough for him to understand the progress of the Monster Research Institute in this area. "Saul, what's going on with the corpses hanging at the bottom of the palace?" Dean asked Saul as he remembered the scene he saw when he came back. Saul bowed his head as he saw Dean ask about this matter. Elder, the corpses belong to the traitors who came to the front of the palace to slander you. I sent people to stop them. They were stubborn, so I killed them and hung their corpses in front of the palace so that others wouldn't dare to do it again. Dean nodded as he could roughly guess the answer. Let people take down their corpses. I have just succeeded the throne, so such atrocities will cause panic among the people. Although I have seized power by force, but I have to govern with benevolence if I want to continue for a long time. Do you understand? Saul was startled. This subordinate knows his mistake. If you meet such people again in the future, just send people to assassinate them. There is no need to make such a big noise. Dean indifferently said. Saul's mouth twitched. This subordinate knows. Dean turned to look at Aisha. His mood was restored. He thought of something and got up. I'm going out for a while. Wait for me to come back, and we'll talk about it. Saul and Noyce were about to open their mouths, but Dean had already rushed out of the palace. Whoosh! Dean flapped his wings and flew away. I have been busy with the matters in the palace these days. I almost forgot about this important event. Dean was anxious as he flew at full speed. It took him less than an hour to reach the Dragon Clan's territory. His mood was much calmer than the last time he came here. Who are you? The guard was about to scold Dean when he saw him. But when he saw Dean's face, he took a deep breath. His face turned pale, his legs trembled, and he took a step back. Dean calmly said, Who is in charge of the Dragon Clan? Yes, it's Elder Laurel. The guard trembled. Dean's eyebrows twitched as he remembered the name. His figure flew into the mountains of the Dragon Clan. His eyes changed color as he locked onto the most exuberant figure on the main peak. He immediately rushed towards that figure. Who? The guards on the mountain road saw Dean rushing towards them. They were about to berate him, but Dean swept past them like a hurricane. In less than half a minute, he reached the top of the mountain. This was once a heavily guarded place of the Dragon Clan, but at the moment, it was like no one was there in front of him. Dean rushed to the square in front of the main peak and shouted, Laurel, come out and see me. His voice was like a rolling thundercloud as it spread throughout the mountain. All the guards in the square were alarmed and gathered. But when they saw Dean, they stopped shouting and turned pale as if they had seen a ghost. 7 or 8 figures flew out of the building at the end of the square. When they saw Dean surrounded by a large number of guards, they were shocked and frightened. Dean looked at the middle-aged man. Are you Laurel? The middle-aged man looked embarrassed. I am not. I am. An old woman with a crutch stepped out and slammed her crutch on the ground. Her face was full of anger. She looked at Dean coldly without fear. What are you doing here? Do you want to kill this old woman? Dean glanced at her. She was also a pioneer, but not as strong as the middle-aged man. He felt strange, but he didn't think much about it. After all, the Dragon Clan was a family with nearly 300 years of history. The clan rules were strict. The strongest person might not be in charge. He said, If you want to die, I can help you. But I only want one thing today. I hope you will behave and give it to me. The old woman frowned and said coldly, What thing? Chapter 806. Blood Baron. Laurel slightly frowned, but she was relieved. She knew the relationship between Dean and Haley, and she also knew that Haley had brought Haley's demon hunter back to the Dragon Clan. It was because she brought the Blood Baron back that the news of Haley's death was confirmed. After all, most pioneers wouldn't abandon their demon hunter. Even if they were injured, they would find the demon hunter after they recovered. Moreover, there was a special connection between the owner and the demon hunter, so they could often predict the location of the demon hunter. Even if it was thousands of miles away, they could still feel a vague direction. So as long as they wanted to find it, they could absolutely find it. The Blood Baron belongs to our Dragon Clan. Laurel considered her words and prepared to say some euphemistic words. After all, Dean had come to their Dragon Clan and asked for the Blood Baron. If they obediently gave it to him, it would be a joke. If you don't give it to me, there will be no Dragon Clan. Dean interrupted her. Laurel's words were stuck in her throat. She slightly opened her mouth, and her tongue was almost tied. Looking at Dean's indifferent face, she was stunned for a long time. Anger rose in her heart. She gritted her teeth and wanted to say something, but in the end, she held it back. Their dragon clan was not the dragon clan of the past. Although the foundation was still there, their vitality was greatly damaged. Dragon Mother, Patriarch, and other pioneers were killed one after another. There were only a few pioneers left in the wasteland, but they were no match for Dean. She didn't dare to provoke the teenager in front of her. Okay, I'll give it to you. She took a deep breath and eased the anger at her heart. She endured it, but her old face gradually calmed down. Aisha is a member of our dragon clan, no matter in the past or in the future. This blood baron is her demon hunter. It should be given to her. The coldness in Dean's eyes was slightly reduced. He said, "Then give it to me." "Wait a minute. I'll let someone get it." Laurel saw that Dean didn't interrupt her this time. She whispered to the people next to her. Dean quietly waited. His eyes changed color as he tracked the person who was leaving. After a moment, the person went to another mountain and then returned. He was holding a huge dark red box. It was 2 feet wide and 9 feet long. It was like a door panel. The red paint on the box was deep and full of ancient and noble feeling. It was carved with complex patterns and the emblem of the dragon family. Dean looked through the box and saw a giant sword lying quietly inside. It was the blood baron. The person carrying the blood vessel was a young man. His face showed that he was struggling, but he hid it carefully. Only his slightly clenched teeth could be seen from his cheeks, as if the box in his hand was quite heavy. Laurel signaled to him. The young man held the box and walked towards Dean. He looked at Dean nervously and carefully handed out the box. Dean lifted his hand and put it on his shoulder. He glanced at the crowd and turned around. His magic wings stretched out from his back as he soared into the sky and disappeared from everyone's sight. Laurel and others were relieved as they saw Dean leave. Their backs were full of cold sweat. Although it was the Black Death season, but they felt cold inside their clothes. Laurel clenched her crutches. Her eyes were full of resentment, but there was more pain and sadness. Dean retracted his wings as he came to the front of Aisha, who was sitting on the throne. The throne was spacious enough for 2 people to sit on. Dean sat next to Aisha and put the box on his lap. He smiled. "Although it's a bit late, but we've finally found it. Can you guess what's inside?" Saul was dumbfounded as he saw Dean's demeanor. Was he really the cold-blooded monster who had seized the palace and killed people in a childlike tone? On the other side, Noyce was very calm, as if he was used to it. Aisha's expression changed as Dean moved the box in front of her. Her pure black eyes slightly turned as she looked at the dark red lacquer box on her lap. She slightly raised her arm to touch the box. Bang! It seemed to be a gentle touch, but it contained a terrifying power. She crushed the box and grabbed the hilt of the sword. The dark red gemstone embedded in the hilt of the sword seemed to shine with a demonic light the moment she held it. Dean's eyes flashed as he saw her take the initiative to change. Aisha could maintain her original posture even in the face of blood. Perhaps her expression would change, but she would never reach out to touch it. She could even restrain her bloodthirsty instinct, but at this moment, she took the initiative to grab the hunter's weapon. There was a trace of inexplicable shock in his heart as he thought of Laurel's words. The hunter and the hunter's weapon seemed to be the most inseparable partners. At this moment, the blood vessel melted and turned into black mucus. It spread along her palm and climbed to her whole body. After a moment, black scales appeared on her body. Unexpectedly, she was going to enter the demonic state. Dean was startled and quickly shook the bell. He shook it 6 times in a strange rhythm. This was the command to stop all the current actions. When the bell stopped ringing, the black mucus on Aisha's body also stopped. The next moment, the black mucus slowly sank into her skin and disappeared. Dean was startled. He helped her up and looked around her. He was surprised to find that her body still maintained the appearance of a human, but the blood vessel was gone. It seemed to have sunk into her body. However, once the hunter's weapon was integrated into the human body, it would enter the demonic state. If the demonic state was lifted, then the hunter's weapon would inevitably return to the tool state and leave the master's body. There was a trace of worry in Dean's heart. He wasn't worried that Aisha would get out of control, but worried that her body would be harmed. He had never seen such a situation before. He didn't know what the consequences would be. Suddenly, he regretted bringing the hunter's weapon back to her. I hope nothing bad will happen to you. Dean looked at her eyes. He wanted to see some feedback from them, but all he could see was the darkness at the bottom of the sea. Chapter 807. Aisha returned to her original appearance after absorbing the demon hunting tool. The flickering light in her eyes gradually calmed down. She sat quietly as before, without any expression or any unusual movements. Dean stared at her for a long time. It was as if time stood still. A touch of dark golden light flashed in Dean's eyes as he saw that she didn't respond. He used his magic marks to carefully observe her body. He found out that there was black mucus in the gap between her spine. It was the blood vessel that had melted. The blood baron was bigger than Aisha when it was in its tool form, but had shrunk significantly after melting. The concentrated black mucus only adhered to the spine, dyeing it pitch black. Moreover, the edges of the bones had become sharper. It looked like a ferocious black centipede, but also like a demon dragon. It looked particularly eye-catching. Dean frowned slightly and stared at it for a while. The black mucus seemed to be silent, and there was no change. He looked at Aisha again and finally retracted his gaze. From the current situation, at least there would be no problem for the time being. He just couldn't figure out why this demon hunter could be integrated into the body but didn't turn into a demonic body. It was probably because of Aisha's zombification. It was like an episode that passed quickly. Gwyneth and a group of royal professors returned to the palace in the middle of the night. Dean was washing his feet. He called Noise to let them in when he heard Gwyneth's return. He continued to soak his feet. "Master, I'm back." Gwyneth looked at Dean, who was sitting in front of the desk in the back hall of the palace. There were 7 or 8 professors behind her. Most of them were over 50 years old. Some of them had white hair. Only one of them looked the youngest, but was middle-aged. "You work hard. Have you eaten dinner?" Dean's eyes moved away from the book and looked at Gwyneth. Gwyneth bowed. "Thank you for your concern. I'll go back to eat after I'm done." "You don't have to go back. I've asked Noise to prepare dinner for you," Dean said. Noise, who was next to him, understood. He gave the maid a look, and the latter immediately left. Gwyneth looked at Dudian. "Thank you, master. How was the harvest?" Dudian asked. Gwyneth took out a small book from her bosom and said, "Young master, I have written Olava's answer in this book." Noise took the notebook and handed it to Dean. Dean looked at the handwriting. It was Gwyneth's arm. He looked from top to bottom. Each answer corresponded to his question. His brows wrinkled as he closed the booklet. This old guy didn't live in vain. He isn't afraid of death. Gwyneth saw his expression and knew that there was a problem. She bowed her head and said, "Young master, do you think he is fooling us?" The old guy was aware of our purpose from the second question. He should have known about the things related to me and Aisha's situation. That's why he answered all your questions. Some of his answers were deliberately misleading. Dean's eyes were indifferent as he threw the booklet into the garbage bin. Gwyneth bit her lips as she saw the booklet fall into the garbage bin. "Young master, please punish me. You didn't do anything wrong. You don't have to blame yourself." Dean calmly said, "I didn't expect him to answer my questions. That's why some of the questions were specifically aimed at him. In short, I've got the answers I wanted. You did a good job. Stay for dinner." Gwyneth was startled as she didn't understand what Dean was talking about. She looked at Dean's expression and didn't see the slightest bit of happiness. However, his words seemed to be praising her. She quickly said, "I'll go back for dinner. It's late, so I won't disturb young master's rest." "It's okay. I slept late. Noise has prepared everything for you." Dean waved his hand. He didn't give her the opportunity to discuss. He looked at the professors behind her. "Old gentleman, have you brought back all the books related to the undead? Did you miss anything?" The professors were flattered as they heard Dean mention them. The oldest of them stepped forward and respectfully said, "Elder, we have selected all the books related to the undead from Arava's underground library. We have checked them twice to make sure that we didn't miss anything. As far as I know, all the precious materials of the Monster Institute are collected by Orava in his library. He often looks through them. Dean nodded. When you were there, was there any trace of the library being touched? The old professor was smart. He understood the meaning behind Dean's words. Elder, Gwyneth said that we were going to make a surprise attack. That's why we went there suddenly. Presumably, they didn't have enough time to move the materials. Moreover, they didn't know the purpose of our visit. I didn't see any empty place on the bookshelves. All the books in the empty bookshelves could be found on the bookshelves next to them. Dean nodded. What was the old man's attitude when you asked for the books? The old professor felt a trace of embarrassment when he heard Dean call him the old man, although he knew that Dean was talking about Orava. After all, he was the same age as Orava. He coughed. Orava was a bit surprised, but didn't stop us. His students were angry, but he stopped them. Dean understood. Everyone has worked hard. It's getting late. Go back and rest. Yes, Elder. The old professor and the other 7 respectfully said, but they were disappointed that Dean didn't ask them to stay for dinner. Gwyneth asked the guards to carry the selected books to the palace after the professors left. The books were stacked high. Dean estimated that there were about 200 or 300 books. He had to read these books himself. If he was a child, he would rather die if he had to read so many books. But now he felt a trace of excitement in his heart. It wasn't that he was eager to learn, but that the more books there were, the more in-depth the research of the Monster Institute was. It meant that the hope of finding a solution was greater. Moreover, with his current memory and vision, his reading speed was dozens of times faster than ordinary people. Although there were many books, but he believed that he would be able to finish them soon. Dean asked the maid to light the fireplace and prepare a brazier under the desk after Gwyneth, Noyce, and others left. The maid was taken aback by his request. Now it was almost the time of the black snow season. Dean actually used a brazier and a fireplace that was used in the black snow season. He would be regarded as a madman if this news spread out. Dean was extremely sensitive to temperature. In the middle of the night, the temperature plummeted. He felt the chill in his right arm. It seemed to flow into his body, so he had to use the fireplace and brazier. At the same time, he also prepared his own brewed white wine. He was not a heavy drinker, but drinking wine could warm his body. Moreover, the effect of white wine was better than wine in driving away the cold. Under the night light, he picked up 7 or 8 books that were piled up in front of the desk. He took them down one by one and flipped through them. Sleepiness hit him in the middle of the night. He asked the maid to prepare hot water for him. He washed his face and continued to read the books. Time passed by quickly. While Dean was studying in the palace, the capital was still in shock because of Yulida's arrest warrant. The nobles in other cities were also ready to make a move. Many rich businessmen were also looking forward to it. They were ready to take advantage of the general trend to make a fortune. Saul worked with Noyce to help Dean with the matters before the succession. The main thing was to wash Dean's reputation and spread the prestige. Noyce was more experienced than Saul in these 2 aspects, but he wasn't familiar with the positions and forces in the inner wall. He could only cooperate with Saul. They discussed and spread the news of Dean's succession to all the cities. It's unbelievable that Princess Eureka is a traitor who colluded with the invaders. What's so surprising? What can't they do in this day and age? I heard that this person called Dean has occupied the palace. Some people say that he is the invader who defeated the princess. Now he is the one who wants to arrest the princess? Where did you hear such unreliable news? The fact that Her Highness the Princess colluded with the invaders has long been an ironclad fact. Didn't you read the previous newspaper? Even Master Mo Zexi came out to condemn and reprimand her. That old man is so old. How could he possibly lie? That's true. Grandmaster Mo Kashi has always been upright. I really didn't expect that Her Highness the Princess's ambition would be so big. Sure enough, an ugly person has an ugly heart. Yes, I heard that her face was replaced by the Monster Research Institute when she was 12 years old. Haven't you seen her original face? I can't eat when I see it. Tis TSK. It's great to have power and influence. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Dean had read more than 200 books. He had a strong memory since childhood. Now that he had evolved into an inner Baron level, his fighting prowess was extraordinary. His memory had also greatly improved, although it wasn't to the exaggerated point of having a photographic memory, but he could write from memory after reading a few times. Elder, tomorrow is your enthronement ceremony. Is there anything else you need to prepare? Saul respectfully asked to see Dean. Dean looked up from the book. What happened to the restless nobles? Chapter 808. Dean's eyes lit up as he heard Saul's words. Then prepare their heads for the celebration. Saul smiled in his heart. He knew that Dean was going to kill them. He didn't try to persuade Dean, as he didn't want to drag himself into the water because of these three people. He asked, Elder, is it assassination or... Do you still need to ask? Dean glanced at him. They don't obey the king's order and openly rebelled. If it's assassination, then wouldn't it be our fault? Saul bowed his head as Dean looked at him. He cursed in his heart. We were wrong. Although he thought about it, he already knew what Dean meant. He said in a respectful tone, Yes, sir. But the three earls have pioneers under their command. You will lead the team personally. Anyone who disobeys will be killed. Dean's eyes fell back to the book. Saul was shocked and bitter in his heart. He wanted to reduce the sin on his body, but he didn't expect Dean to increase it. He didn't dare to bargain. From Dean's tone, he could hear a trace of impatience. He bowed his head and slowly retreated. Master, tomorrow is your inauguration ceremony. Don't you want to take a rest? Noyce saw Dean continue to bury his head in the book. He was worried. He had been accompanying Dean in the palace for the past few days. He knew that Dean had not slept for 4 days and 4 nights. Even if Dean's physique was different from ordinary people, it was quite hard for him to read for such a long time and consume his brain memory and understanding. It's okay. I'll sleep for a while, Dean casually said. He didn't regard the enthronement ceremony as a big day. In his opinion, it was just a trivial matter. After all, he was the king, so he didn't care much about the name. On the contrary, the ceremony was a very important day for other people in the inner wall. Anyone who was a big figure would pay attention to the ceremony. The sun was shining in the west at dusk. The glimmer of light from the window shone into Dean's desk. There was a bit of warmth and comfort on the soft carpet. Increase soul crystals? Dean's eyes were attracted by the book in his hand. His eyes flashed as he carefully looked at it. The book contained experimental records and deductions conducted by a doctor from the Monster Research Institute. This experimental record was interesting to him. Experimental subject, undead. There were 2 of them. The zombies are male and female. The main process of the experiment is to dissect the skull and add the soul crystal. The results of the experiment. After the skull of the male undead was cut open, the soul crystal of the second undead of the same gender was added. After the skull was stitched, the male undead behaved normally. 3 months into the experiment, during a predation, the subject suddenly stiffened and died on the spot. The female undead died on the spot after adding a second soul crystal of the same gender. Follow-up of the experiment. Dissect the experimental target male zombie to confirm the cause of death. 2 soul crystals connected together, causing the original soul crystal in his head to shift and die. Start the 142nd experiment. Dean read page by page. The doctor's experiment always revolved around adding new soul crystals to the undead's head. The soul crystals added in each experiment were different. Some would choose the soul crystals of the same physique, some would choose the soul crystals of the same gender, and sometimes the opposite gender. Even for research, he let the spirit catcher, an institution in the Monster Research Institute mentioned in the book, specializing in finding rare experimental materials for researchers, infect a pair of mother and daughter, a pair of mother and son, and a pair of twins with ptomaine. In these experiments, only the infected twins showed any response. The doctor who conducted the experiment killed the younger brother of the twins, took out the soul crystal from his head, and added it to the elder brother's head. As a result, the elder brother's strength became extraordinarily powerful. According to the data in the experiment, the elder brother's strength suddenly increased from an undead's, whose hunting strength was about LV5 to LV60, and he could easily tear a limitless being into pieces. Only the pioneers could suppress him. But soon after, the undead's whole body showed signs of freezing. The final tracking result of the experiment was that the elder brother's body was completely frozen and became the doctor's collection. Dean read to the end. The doctor tried many combinations later, including father and son, sleeping partners, and so on, but all the experiments failed. Only the experiment of the twin brothers could be regarded as progress. This was also one of the few changes in the undead research among the more than 200 books that Dean read. Although this change was not helpful to Aisha, but compared with other inhumane but failed experiments, it was good. The fusion of the soul crystals between twins will cause the power to go berserk. Husband and wife and mother and daughter can't do it. It seems that the genetic method is a bit special. Dean's eyes flashed. The doctor later carried out the twin experiment, intending to develop his experiment into a terrible weapon. After all, if he could produce a large number of such undead, it would be more terrible. Therefore, the doctor later carried out the experiment of twins with different physiques. Before they were infected, their physiques were promoted to the level of primary, intermediate, and senior hunters. Generally, the strength of the undead after being infected was about level 3. The twin brothers were relatively strong military officers, so they reached the level 5. The primary hunters were equivalent to the level 10 undead. If they were infected, their physiques would greatly increase, reaching the bottom of the level 13 to 15. In this doctor's experiment, he failed twice out of 3 times, but it was because of the problems in the experimental operation. Later, he added the same materials for the experiment. After the 3 experiments were successful, the constitution of the walking dead after the rampage was suppressed by the pioneers of Outer Wilderness, and the pioneers of Outer Wilderness, and 3 pioneers of Outer Wilderness. Well, Dean's eyes swept to the inside of the last page. There seemed to be a bit of paper. His eyes moved. The back has been torn. He looked at the inside of the paper. The traces were a bit old. It seemed that it had been torn a long time ago. Was the Limitless Twins experiment carried out in the back? Dean could not help but think of this. He suddenly thought of the monster created by the Monster Research Institute 100 years ago. Was it created by the doctor using the Limitless Twins? He was not sure if it was the same experiment, but this experiment was amazing enough. After the experiment, the senior hunter twin brothers could break out the strength close to the inner wilderness level. Such an improvement was simply terrifying. However, from the contents of the book, it could be seen that all the subjects of the experiment were imprisoned and could only be controlled by force. It could be seen that the Monster Research Institute did not have a way to control the undead. It seems that they haven't thought of the way of conditional reflex. If they could control it, then the old guy would not put this book on the bookshelf. Dean thought. The results of the experiment were amazing. The only drawback was that the undead could not be controlled by themselves. They could only be used as bombs to attack the enemy's area. But in the giant wall, everyone was in the same area. Once the uncontrollable undead was created, it would be a disaster for the entire giant wall. No one could be spared. However, things were not so absolute. If they could accurately calculate the combat strength of the undead after the experiment, and then estimate the number of the enemy's forces, and then compare them, then they could greatly weaken the enemy's strength. From this point of view, this experiment was enough to be used as a weapon of war. It could be 10 times more terrifying than a cannon. Scientific research is really dangerous. Dean thought. This experiment made him a little excited. Although the number of twins was not many, but it was easy to find hundreds of pairs in the entire giant wall. However, the success rate of the experiment was not 100%. Moreover, the experimental process was complex and the steps were complicated. It was easy to make mistakes. It was likely that they would have to sacrifice more than a dozen pairs of twins to succeed. It seems that the headquarters of the Monster Research Institute is more dangerous than I imagined. They are probably hiding an inner desolate level or even a ruler level dual core undead. but they should not be able to control it, so they won't release it easily. But if they take the initiative to rush in and fall into the same cage as the dual-core undead, then the fate will be very miserable. It seems that the Wall Lord never goes to the headquarters of the Monster Research Institute. There is a deeper reason. Dean was glad, but also a little afraid. But more than that, he was pleasantly surprised. Although he had the super chip in hand, but most of the thermal weapons that he could make were limited. For example, cannons and missiles. Not to mention that the manufacturing process was complex and there were tough requirements for a variety of materials. Even if it was manufactured, it wouldn't be popular in this post-disaster world where non-human combat power existed. With his current strength, the only thing that could make him feel danger was the ruler in the abyss. These kinds of people couldn't be killed by missiles. After all, although the speed of the missile was fast, but it was still visible to the naked eye. It wasn't like the electric current. Even the abyss may not be able to react. In this case, a dual-core berserk undead was undoubtedly a super individual weapon of war. Chapter 809. Dean decided to take a rest after dinner because of Noyce's persuasion. He habitually drank a small bottle of hot liquor before going to bed. He felt warm all over, and the chill in his right arm was dispelled. He hugged Aisha and slept together with her. He covered them with a thick animal fur quilt. Dean gently hugged her body. He didn't have any evil thoughts. It wasn't that he didn't have feelings for Aisha, but he couldn't bear to blaspheme her. Dean's consciousness blurred. He vaguely saw Aisha sitting up in his arms. He also sat up. He didn't know when their surroundings had turned into a world of ice and snow. Then he saw Aisha using her hands to cast a barrier that surrounded them. He sat on the ground and stared at her for a long time. Dean woke up when he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. He opened his eyes. The light in the bedroom was on even when he was sleeping. The ultra-wide field of vision allowed him to see everything in the room except for the mattress under his back. There was no one in the bedroom. He slowly propped up his body. He felt the pain in his abdomen turn into colic. He found that his back was soaked with cold sweat. He was panting slightly and felt his mouth and tongue dry. He wanted to drink water, but his body felt like it was paralyzed and he couldn't exert any strength. Come, come. Dean took a deep breath and shouted. After a few minutes, there was a rush of footsteps outside the bedroom. Several maids ran in panic and saw Dean, who was sweating and red on the bed. They were shocked and hurriedly said, "Sir, what happened to you? Call Noyce." Dean gasped for breath. Several maids quickly turned and ran away, leaving one of them to take care of Dean in the bedroom. She saw Dean's weak face and couldn't help but ask carefully, "Sir, is there anything I can help you with?" "Water." Dean barely spat out a word. He felt that his breathing was getting heavier and heavier. The pain in his abdomen spread to his chest. His heart seemed to be twisting and twitching. The pain affected his nerves, and even his head was hurting. The maid quickly took a cup and poured water for Dean and sent it in front of Dean. Dean was about to take it, but suddenly thought of something. He waved his hand, and the cup fell to the ground. Fortunately, the carpet in the bedroom was thick, so the cup didn't break, but the water was spilled. The maid was scared and hurriedly knelt down. Lizzie, I beg Elder to spare my life." Dean gasped for breath. He was upset to hear her begging for mercy, but he had no strength to stop her. He just let her kneel. His eyelids drooped slightly, and only a trace of vision was left to look at the front. His vision was a little blurred, and he felt that his brain could not work. But his previous experience on the edge of life and death gave him a strong resistance to this uncomfortable state. He tried to think about the reason for the sudden situation while waiting for Noyce to come. 10 minutes later, Noyce ran over in a hurry. He was still wearing pajamas. Dean's heart warmed as he looked at Noyce. "Master, what's wrong with you? Why is your face so red?" Noyce was surprised as he saw Dean's red face. "I may have been poisoned," Dean reluctantly said. "Find a doctor and prepare the life capsule." Noyce was shocked. He knew about the life capsule when he came to the inner wall. It was the most precious medicine of the royal family. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a life-saving medicine. Basically, as long as the person was breathing, it could be saved. However, there were only 2 pills in total, and the formula had been lost. He didn't expect that Dean would use it now. It showed that his state was in a critical state. He immediately turned around and shouted at the guards to pass on Dean's words. Dean felt as if his throat was going to crack. He said reluctantly, "Give me water." Noyce turned and took 2 cups. He poured 1 cup and drank 2 mouthfuls of water. After a while, he poured the other cup and handed it to Dean. Dean slightly raised his hand, but he didn't have the strength to lift it. He could only use his eyes to signal Noyce. Noyce was surprised. He didn't expect that Dean would be poisoned to such a serious extent. He was the toxicologist of Dean, so it was hard for him to absolve himself from the blame. Noyce was worried, but he was more afraid that Dean would have an accident. He helped Dean up and fed him water. Several doctors and a large group of guards arrived. Sergei, Gwyneth, and Saul were also present. There were also several royal ministers who were in charge of internal affairs. They had surrendered to Dean a long time ago. "All of you go out. Doctors stay," Dean said. Sergei, Gwyneth, Saul, and others looked at each other. They wanted to ask, but they held back and slowly retreated. Several doctors came forward to diagnose Dean. Noyce held the box of life capsule as he waited for Dean. If Dean was about to die, then he would immediately hand over the life capsule to him. "Elder, you have been poisoned," the doctor exclaimed as he checked Dean's body. The others saw that Dean's abdomen was swollen with sarcomas. They could faintly see the veins in his chest. It was an obvious sign of poisoning. Another doctor immediately opened the medicine box and took out a bottle. He poured the powder inside on the gauze and took out a knife. "Elder, we need further examination. We need to bleed. What do you think?" "Yes." Dean spat out a word. The doctor nodded slightly. His face was dignified. He stepped forward and cut the sarcoma on Dudian's abdomen. He put gauze stained with powder on it. After a moment, he took off the gauze. It was pitch black and exuded a foul smell. "He is poisoned." A doctor took a deep breath. "What kind of poison is this? Can it be cured?" Noyce's face turned ugly as he looked at the doctors. "What kind of poison is this? Can it be cured?" The doctors looked at him and Dean. "We need to further test it. I will give Elder some antidote and antidote. We need to bleed a lot. I hope Elder can hold on." Dean thought that he would die if he couldn't hold on. Of course, he had to hold on. "Go and prepare," Dean said. Seeing that he had agreed, the doctors accepted the order and turned to leave. Dean looked at Noyce. Noyce's soul almost flew out of his body. "Master, I have tested everything you have eaten. There is absolutely no poison. If there was poison, then I would have been poisoned. I didn't deceive you." Dean stared at him for a moment. "I have never doubted you. Anyone will betray me. You won't." Noyce was moved. His eyes turned slightly red. "Young master, do you really believe me?" "Of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to put my life in your hands." Dean's voice was weak, but very serious. He felt that the pain in his body seemed to be slowly adapting. It was not as unbearable as before. At least he could speak clearly. "There are countless people who want to assassinate me. Someone poisoned me. Either your body is immune to the poison, or I ate something that you didn't eat." Noyce saw that Dudian's eyes were serious. It seemed that he didn't doubt him. Noyce thought for a moment. "If it is poisonous, then I should be able to test it. The poison is so strong that even if I am immune to it, it's impossible that I didn't detect any abnormality. Is it, Master, you ate something that I haven't eaten before?" Dean also felt that this was more likely. His eyes revealed a contemplative look. He was cautious in every aspect. He let Noyce taste everything he ate. Even the water he drank was tested by Noyce. Suddenly, his eyes moved, and he turned to look at the small bottle on the desk in front of him. He didn't let Noyce test the liquor. "Go and drink the wine," Dudian said. Noyce was startled. He knew about Dean's habit of drinking. He wanted to try this wine for Dean, but it was too strong. It was stronger than draft beer and wine. The taste was pungent. Even with his endurance, he couldn't bear it, so he didn't try it. Noyce grabbed the small bottle on the desk and opened it. He saw that there was still half a bottle inside. He immediately drank it. The cold liquid passed through his throat, but it brought a burning feeling. His tears almost flowed down. He couldn't figure out why Dean liked to drink such strong liquor. Wasn't the wine 100 times more delicious than this? Dean looked at Noyce's sad face. It seemed that tears were coming out of his eyes. But he knew that Noyce's taste was biased towards the taste of Westerners. It was normal that he wasn't used to drinking liquor. Noyce tried to adapt to the discomfort brought by the liquor. He carefully felt his body. After a while, the stimulation of the liquor gradually subsided, but he didn't feel any difference in his body. "Master, it seems that the liquor isn't poisonous," Noyce said. Dean replied, "Don't worry. It has been a while since I drank the liquor." Noyce turned back to face Dean. Dean wanted to wait for his body to be poisoned, but he suddenly thought that the news that he was poisoned should have spread out. The person who poisoned him was likely to know the news. He must confirm whether there was poison in the wine as soon as possible so that he would have a direction to track. "Go and find a maid." Dean's eyes flashed coldly. Noyce was stunned and somewhat puzzled, but he still went outside the hall and called a maid in. The maid was beautiful and had a graceful figure. She was shy and lowered her head. She didn't dare to look at Dean. There was a bit of fear and trepidation on her face. All the people in the palace knew about the process of Dean sitting on the throne. The more the rumors spread, the more ferocious it was. Dean was like a peerless devil in the hearts of the servants. "Give her some of the liquor in that bottle," Dean said. Noyce was stunned. "Young master, what's your name?" Dean didn't pay attention to him, but asked the maid. "My lord, my name is Aina." The maid lowered her head even more. Dean asked, "Who is in your family?" The maid was at a loss, but answered truthfully. "Elder, in addition to my parents, I have a younger brother who is studying tailoring in the West End district." Dean nodded, but there was a trace of coldness in his eyes. "After drinking the liquor, your parents will move to the Prant district. The royal family will assign them a house. Your brother will also be sent to the Prant district to study. The tuition fees will be borne by the royal family." Noyce looked at him, and the maid called Anna. It seemed that the maid was shocked by Dean's generous conditions. Her innocent expression made Noyce feel pain in his heart. He could only sigh in his heart. He knew what Dean was thinking. The maid was just an ordinary person. If she drank such a poison wine, then she would be poisoned immediately. He could confirm that the poison was in the wine. However, the maid didn't know that the condition given by Dean was to buy her life. It was an unequal deal. The weaker party wasn't qualified to talk about conditions. The strong preyed on the weak. Fate was unfair. At this moment, he deeply felt the helplessness of life and pity for this maid. However, it was only pity because he was once a weak person. He knew that everything was the iron law of this world. Fortunately, he was now standing on the side of the strong. Dean naturally didn't know that Noyce would feel a lot of emotions in his heart. He knew that Noyce would feel that it was cruel, but he knew that he had to adapt to it. So he didn't avoid Noyce. "Drink," Dean said to Aina. Aina looked at the wine on the table. She saw that Dean often drank, so she knew what wine was. When she was selected to be a maid in the royal family, she knew that in the pubs, men often used wine to trick women into bed. So now she was blushing and her heart was beating faster. She didn't know how she would be treated after drinking. Would she become a princess? She had a girlish fantasy in her heart. There was a little expectation, but she was also a little nervous. She picked up the wine on the table, but found that the bottle was empty. She turned to look at Dean with an innocent expression. Dean glanced at Noyce and said to Aina, "There should be 1 or 2 drops left." Aina's cheeks reddened as she turned the bottle upside down. She licked the wine out of the bottle in front of Dean and Noyce. She felt that she wasn't a lady, so her face turned red. Chapter 8:10. Noyce held Aina's body and touched her neck. Her neck was warm and soft, but there was no pulse. "Master, she is dead." Noyce sighed as he looked at Dudian. "I know." Dean's eyes were gloomy. Noyce slowly put down Aina's body and looked at the bottle on the table. "There is poison in the wine." "Master, should I arrest all the brewers and interrogate them one by one?" Dean was silent for a moment. "In addition to investigating the brewers, check all the servants and attendants who have served me in the palace. It is possible that the poisoner got the news from them. Noyce replied, I know. It didn't take long for the doctors to come back and prepare the bloodletting operation for Dean. The treatment continued until the middle of the night. When the dawn light shined on the palace, the doctors wiped the sweat from their foreheads and stitched up Dean's wound. The chief surgeon said, Elder, the toxins in your body have temporarily stabilized. After a period of time, you will be completely healed. Dean nodded slightly. Temporarily block the news of me being poisoned. Don't spread it out. If someone asks you about it, immediately report to me and I will reward you. In addition, if someone forces you, tell them that I am poisoned and won't live long. The doctors were startled but bowed their heads. Noyce looked at Dean as the doctors slowly retreated. Master, the results of the interrogation have come out. One of the brewers has confessed. He said that his distant relative had recently visited him. Others also accused that his relative had come to the brewery. It is likely that this person was the one who poisoned Aina. I've asked the worker, and he said that his relative isn't a big shot. He is just an ordinary petty bourgeois family with 2 manors and 50 acres of land. There is nothing special about him. Oh, Dean's face was pale, but his expression was calm. He was surprised to hear Noyce's words. Have you found his distant relative? I've sent people to arrest him. Noyce said. Dean's eyebrows twitched. He didn't expect to find the poisoner so soon. It seemed that the enemy's preparation for the aftermath was not thorough. However, it was also possible that there was no need to keep this secret. It's almost dawn and the inauguration ceremony is about to begin. Get ready. Dean looked out of the window and said to Noyce. Noyce was startled. Young master, you are seriously injured. Do you want to postpone the ceremony? If the enemy sneaks into the ceremony and attacks you, it doesn't matter. If someone sneaks up on us, we still have you, don't we? Dean's face was calm. It's just a little poison. Since I didn't die, then it's nothing. But it's unusual for it to make me feel so uncomfortable. Fortunately, the enemy didn't have much relationship with the Monster Research Institute. Otherwise, I wouldn't have just died from poisoning. Noyce was surprised. He understood the meaning of Dean's words. If the enemy was related to the Monster Research Institute, then perhaps the poison in the wine would be the undead virus. If that was the case, then there would be no cure. Thinking of this, cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and his hands and feet felt cold. What a dangerous accident it was. If the enemy's poison was stronger, then Dean would die. Once Dean died, then their tyrannical life would come to an end. They would be torn apart by the nobles. Moreover, Dean's words also gave him a wake-up call. Although he could digest most of the toxins, after all, he was not absolutely immune to toxins. If the enemy was crazy enough to put ptomaine on Dean, then the first one to be infected would be him. Such a possibility made it difficult for him to digest. He had only considered the toxin when he was in the outer wall because it was extremely difficult to get the undead virus in the inner wall. But the inner wall was different. There were undeads in the Monster Research Institute. It wasn't difficult to get the undead virus from them. Moreover, the person who could assassinate Dean wasn't an ordinary person. He must have some power. It seems that I have to choose a few people to be my poison testers in the future. He thought in his heart. This was his way to save himself. Dean felt Noyce's body stiffen. He knew what Noyce was thinking, but he didn't say anything. He pretended not to see. The person who poisoned the wine didn't use the ptomaine, but this poison. I don't know if they didn't think of it, or if they didn't have the ability to get the ptomaine. Noyce recovered and reluctantly smiled. Master, I think they didn't expect that these people would secretly poison your wine. They should have some ability. There was an outbreak of corpses in the inner wall. Although all the corpses in the city have been burned, but it shouldn't be difficult to get the poison. According to what you said, they should want to use the ptomaine. Dean said. Noyce was startled, but he was speechless as he thought that it was true. There are only 2 possibilities. One is that they think that it would be more dangerous to use the ptomaine to infect me. After all, I'm an inner Baron level master. Once I'm infected, then the inner wall would have 2 inner Baron level undead. The result would be worse than the current situation. Dean's eyes lit up. The second possibility is that they don't have a deep understanding of the ptomaine. They think that the domain of low-level undead won't be able to infect me. Which possibility do you think is more likely? Noyce was stunned. It should be the first one. Dean nodded. Yes. It shows that they know about Aisha's existence. They know that she has been infected by the domain. They are worried that Aisha will go out of control without my restraint. It's not that they don't want to use the domain, but they don't dare to use it. But it shows that the person who poisoned the wine isn't a noble nor a member of the Monster Research Institute. At this point, he fell into deep thought. Noyce asked, why not a noble or a member of a Monster Research Institute? Because they don't care so much. The nobles are after profit. The Monster Research Institute should have a way to trap the undeads. So if it was them, they would have poisoned the undeads directly. The person who poisoned the undeads has a good heart. Dudian said. Noyce scratched his head. Master, is it a righteous person? Dean looked at him. You are talking as if we are the villains in a novel. Noyce smiled embarrassedly, but he thought in his heart, we are not far from the villains. What is the maid's name? Settle her family first and compensate them according to what I said. Dean pointed to the corpse on the ground. Noyce looked at the swollen and rotten cheeks of the maid. He smiled in his heart. He didn't believe that Dean would forget a name that he had just heard, unless Dean didn't put the latter's words in his heart and didn't use his brain to remember. Cold-blooded, he thought, but then he asked himself, so what if he remembered her name? She was dead. Would remembering her name make him more friendly? He could only sigh and crouch down to pick up Anna's corpse. He looked at the rotting skin all over her body. In just a short moment, the poison had turned a clean and beautiful girl into such a ghastly state. It could be seen how terrifying this poison was. The sky was clear and the sun was rising. The enthronement ceremony slowly began in front of the palace. The nobles, led by the count, entered the venue one after another. The guards were dressed in silver armor, and they were as neat as one. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. Outside the venue of the ceremony, a large number of people came to watch and admire this rare moment. Saul made a speech after all the officials and nobles had taken their seats. Dean appeared on the platform at the top of the steps in front of the palace after the long opening remarks. He finished the lines that Saul had written in advance and returned to the palace. Saul was in charge of the following matters while Noyce was his assistant. Is that Dean? I didn't expect him to be so young. He is younger than the rumors. He looks to be in his 20s. Princess Eureka seems to be the same age as him. I didn't expect one to be in heaven and the other to be on earth. What a pity. Shoo, lower your voice. Don't let anyone hear it. If this person hears it, humph, don't you know what happened to Sheeming? The nobles in front of the venue were in a complicated mood. They didn't want to listen to Saul's long speech. Dean went back to the study room. The bell and music fluttered outside. There was a stuffy feeling because of the window. He knew that the ceremony would last until the evening. In the next 3 days, the entire King City would hold carnival ceremonies. He didn't have so much time to spend on these things. Although his absence would make people feel arrogant, he didn't care about it. There are dozens of books left. I hope they won't let me down. Dean looked at the pile of books in front of him. He was nervous. He felt that there were too few books. It would be great if there were twice as many books. He calmed down and carefully read. Time flashed by. 5 days passed. The carnival of the ceremony had long ended, and the city was calm again. In the palace, Dean stayed in the study room for several days. Only on the night of the ceremony, he met with the nobles and ministers in the palace. Since then, he stayed in the study room and read the books of the Institute. 5 days later, he had read the remaining dozens of books. During this time, the toxins in his body had been completely digested. His adaptability was even more effective than the antitoxin drugs prescribed by the doctors. Failure, failure, all failures. Dean stayed in the study room. His hair was messy. Looking at the more than 200 books in front of him, his eyes were dull. More than 200 books recorded various aspects of the research on the undead. Nearly half of them recorded how to treat the undead and restore them to their original appearance. In addition to him, the Monster Institute was also concerned about this experiment. A large number of doctors had studied this experiment for more than 200 years, but all of them failed. Some removed the soul crystal in the skull and replaced it with the human brain. Some kept the corpses in the houses they were familiar with before they died for observation. Some used the blood of the relatives of the undead to replace the blood. There are all kinds of methods. Dean felt that some methods were completely unscientific and superstitious, but the doctors had used them. Almost all the methods that he could think of had been used. The result was the same: failure. He found it hard to accept such a conclusion. Did she really die after being infected by the poison? Since she was dead, why could she still move and bite? If she wasn't dead, why couldn't she restore her memory? "Master!" Noise called out from outside the room. He was ready to push the door. Dean roared, "Get out of here!" Noise was scared. He had never seen Dean yell at him, let alone lose his temper. His face changed as he looked inside the room. He could see Dean sitting on the desk with his back facing the door. He didn't know what he was thinking. Noise hesitated for a moment, but slowly turned back. He stood not far from the door. He stood guard for 7 days. 7 days was exceptionally fast for the residents of the King's City. But for Noise, it was as difficult as the whole black snow season. Dean didn't go out of the bedroom for 7 days. He didn't eat or drink for 7 days. Noise went to deliver food, but Dean yelled at him again. "What's wrong with the young master?" Sergei ran into the palace and asked in surprise. He had heard that Dean didn't eat or drink for 7 days. He put down his work and rushed over. Noise looked at him and sighed. It should be related to Aisha. Her? Sergei was puzzled. The young master has taken a lot of experimental materials from the Monster Research Institute. It seems that he has read all of them. It seems that he didn't find the answer, so he can't accept it. Noise sighed. Sergei's eyes widened. Is there really no way? It's going to be difficult. Noise whispered. Sergei looked at the shadow in the room. Isn't he crazy? He hasn't eaten for 7 days. I'm worried that he won't be able to hold on. Noise said in a worried tone. He was poisoned and his body hasn't recovered yet. Sergei shook his head. Eating and drinking is a small matter. I'm afraid that he won't be able to take it. Noise looked at him. Why don't you go and persuade him? How? Sergei stared at him. Don't you know how important this woman is in his heart? Have you seen him smile at you? No. Noise sighed. I heard from the Dragon Clan that Aisha is in such a situation because she saved the young master. She is the most important person for the young master. Chapter 8:11. I hope the young master can think it through. Although death is the greatest sorrow in the world, everyone will experience it. There will inevitably be regrets in life, but life won't stop. I hope he won't be depressed. Noise whispered with melancholy eyes. Sergei nodded. The torture in the prison didn't defeat him. He shouldn't be defeated by this. Noise said bitterly. A weak-willed person will be easily defeated by external pressure. But for a strong-willed person like young master, what can't kill him will only make him stronger. But the only thing that can destroy him is himself. Sergei was silent as he looked at the closed door. In the room, Aisha was quietly sitting on a chair. A sloppy figure with messy hair was sitting on the carpet in front of her feet. It was Dean. In just 7 days, his mouth was full of stubble. His eyes were a bit sad. He looked up at Aisha in front of him. He stroked her knees, feeling the smooth but cold knees. There was a trace of pain in his heart. Although he didn't have much hope that he could find a way to cure the undead from the experiments of the Monster Research Institute. After all, if such a method existed, the Monster Research Institute would have used it long ago. This was definitely a good thing for human beings. But the Monster Research Institute didn't use it, so he already had an idea. But he still had hope. He thought that even if there wasn't a cure, but at least he could find some direction of development. Or maybe it could stimulate him to explore the method. But there was none. All the experiments ended in failure. Moreover, the experiments were very complete. Even if he was the one doing it, it would be difficult to do better. Is there really no hope? He looked at her and repeatedly asked himself. Although he didn't want to think about it and didn't want to admit it, but the trace of reason in his heart told him that the boundary between life and death was very far and how irreversible it was. Even the richest man in the world in the old era couldn't buy his life from the god of death. He knew Aisha's situation better than anyone else. He didn't want to think about it and didn't want to believe it, but he knew it in his heart. He hated himself for knowing too much. If he could be ignorant and superstitious like the people of this era, then maybe he could continue to have hope. He would rather believe in God if he could bring her back to life. He was even willing to pray to the gods. The experimental data from the Monster Research Institute made him admit the truth. He really couldn't come back. He thought of the girl's playful smile when they met for the first time. He thought of how she looked like when she was the saintess when they met again. He thought of how cold she looked when she leaned against each other in the ice cave in the barren area. If he could go back in time, how he wished he could return to that barrier made of ice. That was the warmest place in his memory. However, time could not be reversed, just like how a dead person could not be resurrected. This was irreversible, and he could only rely on himself to adapt. But how painful was it to adapt to loss? During this process of adaptation, time did not speed up. It continued to flow slowly, as if everything had nothing to do with it. Dean looked up at her beautiful face. It was like a frozen face that would never fade. He wanted to cry, but he couldn't. It seemed that all the tears had already flowed out. His eyes slowly became empty. He moved closer to her knees and rested his head on her lap. He didn't know how much time had passed, but he felt a soft hand gently stroking his hair. The comfortable feeling made him intoxicated, and he didn't want to open his eyes. Then he heard a soft voice coming from above his head. "The ground is cold. Get up." This familiar voice and tone made his heart tremble. He slowly opened his eyes and looked up at her. He saw that Aisha was still in the same position as before. Her hands were still hanging on both sides. It seemed that everything was an illusion. Then he saw that his eyes were a little blurred. He raised his hand to wipe his eyes. His face was wet with tears. He laughed as he watched, and as he laughed, he suddenly hugged her leg and wailed like a child. He wept so bitterly that his voice was hoarse. As he wept, he could not help thinking, would she see him in this state and comfort him as she had done in his dream? This thought made him burst into tears. He looked up at Aisha. What he saw was still the same indifferent expression. There was no trace of change. He couldn't go back to the past. For a long time, Dean slowly calmed down. He slowly climbed up from the ground and sat next to Aisha. He looked around the empty room. The decoration inside was extremely luxurious. He looked around and suddenly thought that human beings in this world could evolve to the level of pioneers. They had completely broken the cognition of the old era. Then why should he care about the so-called rational worldview of the old era? What was rationality? Was it rationality to not use emotion? Or was it rationality to follow the basic cognition of the worldview? If so, since things like the undead existed and those extraterrestrial invaders had appeared, why should he follow the worldview of human beings on Earth? Thinking of this, his dim eyes gradually glowed. He remembered what he had said to Richelieu before. No one could prove the existence of God. Therefore, no one could deny the existence of God. In that case, no one could prove the existence of the soul. Therefore, no one could deny the existence of the soul. In this world, no one would believe that there was a plane. Technology would always break the original worldview. In that case, when technology multiplied to a higher level, why couldn't the dead come back to life? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was reasonable. At the same time, he felt a strong impulse in his body. He said to Aisha, "Even if everyone's experiment failed, I will succeed. I will definitely save you." Aisha was silent. Dean stared at her for a moment. He stood up and moved the torn experimental materials on the desk. He saw Noyce and Sergei outside the door. They were whispering to each other, but Dean could hear them clearly. He said, "You two come in." Sergei and Noyce were shocked as they heard the sound from the room. They were pleasantly surprised as they immediately went forward to open the door. They saw that the room was in a mess. Books were scattered all over the floor. Noyce lifted his foot and stepped through the gap between the books. He looked at Aisha, who was sitting on the chair next to him. Then he looked at Dean. He couldn't recognize Dean in just 7 days. Sergei had the same feeling. Although the growth rate of the human body was very small in 7 days, but they felt that Dean was completely different from before. Although his appearance had changed a lot, but his temperament seemed to have changed. If they had to describe him, then they would say that he was a wise and resourceful youth. But at this moment, Dean was like a king overlooking the world. He didn't seem to have any fear. "Master," Noyce carefully called out. Dean looked at him. "Are you afraid of me now?" Noyce was surprised as he didn't expect Dean to joke with him. "No. How can I be angry with young master? I'm not sensible enough to disturb young master." I'm fine, Dean calmly said. "Didn't you say that you prepared a big meal for me? I'm hungry now. Oh, call someone to come over and tidy up this place. Don't throw away the broken books. I still need them." Noyce and Sergei looked at each other and nodded. Dean followed Noyce to the dining room. He hadn't eaten for 7 days, so he was hungry. While eating, he thought of the poisoning incident and asked, "Have you caught the distant relatives of the worker from last time?" Noyce, who was standing at the side, immediately answered, "Young master, we found that person's distant relative, but he was already dead by the time we found him. It seems he committed suicide." Dean was not surprised. "Are there any clues about the follow-up of this matter?" Noyce replied, "Not yet. I have sent people to investigate the people that the worker has been in contact with in recent months, but there are no clues. So, this matter has come to an end at this point?" Yes. Noyce answered with some difficulty. Dean drank a spoonful of soup. "Let's put this matter aside for the time being. The enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. It will be very difficult to find them. Fortunately, they aren't smart enough. They didn't take this opportunity to deliberately leave clues to mislead us. Otherwise, we will become their weapons." Noyce saw that Dean didn't seem to care about this matter. He was startled. "Master, are we going to let this matter go? That's the only way." Noyce was stunned and somewhat indignant in his heart. "These people almost caused you to have a big accident. Are we just going to eat this in silence? We are sitting in this position. Isn't it normal to eat in silence?" Dean comforted him. "You should pay what you get. Be careful in the future. They didn't succeed this time, but I guess they will try again next time. As long as you are careful, sooner or later, they will take the initiative to come to your door." Noyce gritted his teeth. "Young master, I'll be more careful next time. I won't let them succeed." "All right." Dean nodded. His attitude was a lot more serious as he patted his shoulder. "In order to punish you, from today on you have to follow me and learn how to drink liquor. I won't quit because of these villains." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.